Welcome to Frame Trap.
You're doing the NPR thing too now.
Yeah, I'm so used to starting Frame Trap the same way that I wanted to bring it low. Because we're talking about vampires this episode. It's going to be a very vampire-heavy episode. Joining me is Isla.
Hi.
I always say Isla Hink, and I don't know why I didn't say Hink there.
Yeah.
Joining me is Isla Hink.
That's
and
like
Daniel Bloodworth.
When Blood said Dale without the chip, and I was
Dale
just like,
without the
who
chip.
are you talking about?
Well,
Who's Dale?
For
like
context,
a race car driver?
What makes your confusion even funnier is it's not like he just started talking
No,
about
we
Dale
were
and
talking
Elder.
about Chip and
You were
Dale.
talking about Chip and Dale for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. And then he was like,
you were
Dale
like, Dale,
got
and you're like,
cosmetic
I don't know
surgery.
who-
And I was like, what are you talking about?
Bloodworth is really into this new Chip and Dale movie.
I don't know if I'd say really into it, but I enjoyed it.
Bloodworth
Okay.
loved it, and Huber is inexplicably angry about it.
Huber's angry. Yep. Too many cameos.
Too many cameos. He hates it.
It's
It's residual MCU rage, I think.
Yeah, boy, he's just been simmering with that MCU rage.
It's a thing.
Isla, you're a big movie person.
I am. You didn't start your timer. Is that okay?
No, that's not okay. That's actually like one of the worst mistakes I can make because it will make my job so
It was
much
only
harder
about a
today.
minute. It was only like a minute.
Yeah, I'm going to write plus 1 minute.
Ish. I mean, I don't know.
Men-ish.
Yes, movies.
Oh, man. Okay, yes, movies.
Movies are all I care about in music.
Really?
And games, I guess.
I
Probably
think-
in that order.
I think that was extremely accurate.
And fonts.
Oh, and fonts.
and
I love fonts. Typography, yeah.
What do you think is your personal favorite movie? Not necessarily the best that has come out in 2022.
Oh, of 2022. I was like,
2022.
Princess Bride,
Whoa.
easy. Probably Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Man, I really need to see that.
Yeah.
I wasn't
So
even
far?
thinking about that when I was formulating this
Yeah.
I
question.
mean, I could say that, but the two things in my mind are like, well, one, I don't think I've seen many movies that came out in
Right.
2022, and then two, I'm like, did that technically come out in 2022, or did that slide in before? I don't know.
Time
guess
is...
I'm
I'm
not a wider
almost
release
positive
in
it's a 2022
2022.
release.
Everything Everywhere?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
almost
I
positive.
saw it like a month ago in the Alamo, so I don't know.
Yeah. Boy, when that comes out to home video, if any of one of you is aware, remind me.
Yeah.
I'll
Sure.
rent it. Yes.
I'm looking forward to Men.
Yeah, boy.
That looks crazy.
I don't know anything about that movie other than that trailer, which
The
was
trailer is
wild.
bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the whole concept of it,
Yeah.
very cool. Also,
Well, I didn't even know the concept really. I don't know anything beyond that trailer. I mean, I can
Yeah.
Yeah.
infer,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah, the tone. It's
A24,
really
I ended up, I don't know if I told you this, I probably said this before, but A24's emails, I wound up on their like mailing list or
Oh,
whatever.
nice.
And just
Oh,
like for
okay.
ads and stuff,
Got it.
whatever. Like they're like, our new movie's out. Nothing like special.
I feel
Anybody
like they
can
came
do
out
it.
of nowhere. When I saw
Well,
that movie, like
I
there's
got
like
an
a whole bunch of their
email.
movies everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, A24 has been around, but yeah. I got an email from them, and the subject line was just "Yes, all men," and I was just like, "Oh boy, we're going hard." Okay,
Swinging.
A24 doesn't give a shit.
Swinging.
It was hilarious.
kind of along the same lines. I feel like I've seen that Nope trailer probably 10
Oh,
times.
yeah.
The music.
When does that come out?
It's July.
July,
I will be
okay.
there
Yeah.
as soon as I possibly can be. Love Jordan
Day and
Peele's
date.
work. Yeah, I have nothing but that. Somebody, I read a YouTube comment about the Nope trailer that I was like, this comment is so on point. It's so true. Where he's like, this is what a movie trailer should be, where it's mysterious and you can glean things from it, but it doesn't feel like it gives away
Right.
all the surprises or that you have like the whole 3-act structure in front of you.
Right.
And I was like, yes, absolutely.
perfect.
This feels like a real movie trailer in like a classic sense almost.
And it gives you what you need. Like
It
it
gives you
gives
what you
you enough of the tone and mood, and leaves you going like, aliens maybe.
Yeah.
And you're like, cool.
But what I love about it is it's not quite like all tone. It's
Right.
not quite all abstract. Like
Right.
the little bit of characterization and humor that you get at the beginning, super important, I think.
also,
Yeah.
the title is perfect.
Nope. Yeah.
Just Nope.
Yeah.
Because that's like, and I respect anyone in a horror movie who just goes nope,
Yeah.
and like tries to get out of the situation.
Yep.
Nope.
Yep.
Like it's so good, immediately endearing. It's like that's exactly what I would do.
I really want my wife to go with me, and of course she said nope. Right. She hates
Nope.
horror. Yeah.
The trailer for, what is it called? 3,000 Years of Longing.
I
By
haven't.
George Miller.
I saw the teaser. I haven't sat down and watched the
It
full
is
trailer. Yeah.
crazy looking.
Yeah.
Tilda Swinton unlocks a genie bottle and Idris Elba comes out. And then it just goes nuts. And I'm just like, all right, George,
Sounds like
I'm
it's
here.
already
What more do you need?
Yeah, what more do you need? 70 years old.
Man, I don't know if I could pick a clear winner for me in terms of movies that have come out in 2022. I really like Multiverse of Madness. I really like Northman, and I really like X. But I don't know
I haven't seen X yet.
which among those is probably my favorite. Probably Northman. I really liked Northman a lot, but...
I loved the visuals and the camera work in Northman a lot.
They were. I honestly think that that's the thing that is pushing it over the edge for me. Is that movie just purely from a visual perspective? Is absolutely insane. Like every single scene is.
Yeah, revenge. Nuts. Narratively, revenge stuff for me personally just has like a steep hill to climb because I'm just like the motivation kind of gets old for me. But like visually, that movie was just out of control. Still, The Witch is my favorite. The Witch of his.
The Witch might be my favorite movie of all time.
It's so good.
A24? I rewatched it recently, and like you kind of do you ever have that fear when you really love something, but you haven't revisited it in a long time, and you're like, is it as good as I remember? And then the rewatch of it, I was like, oh, this is even better than I thought it was. Like that movie is.
I have that fear, but I also have the fear of showing something super precious to me to like a significant other.
Yes, absolutely.
Like I showed Best in Show, which is like ultimate importance to me. My sister and I quote it all the time. My mom would quote it all the time. Like hugely important film in my family. Showed it to Sophia.
I would have expected.
Oh yeah, we love Christopher Guest, but like I showed it to Sophia, and it's like she's from Norway. Didn't have like the context of dog shows, didn't have the context of like Christopher Guest, like didn't have less
That's
familiar
so
with
though.
Mockumentary stuff, and I was just like it's okay. I had to like prime you for this better. Yeah, I mean she enjoyed it, but it wasn't just like a slam dunk like I thought it might be.
Yeah, showing The Witch to my wife, I was like, this is so amazing and deep and meaningful, and the way that it's talking about Puritanism and all of this stuff, and she's just like, no, it's scary and I hate it, right? Like not being able to get beyond that primal fear. Yeah. It's very, very funny.
TV has been, I know this isn't a movie and TV podcast,
No.
but Severance is incredible. That was one of my favorite things of this year.
I don't know anything about Severance other than the guy that's in it was also in Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
And that everybody tells me to watch it.
Yeah.
Well, just like it's gotten critical acclaim, I think is a better way
Huber's
of saying
against it because it's a blue check mark show. He says all the blue check marks are talking about it. And then he just writes it off. And I'm just like, okay, dude. Huber, dude. Love him.
But I mean, like, I kind of get where he's coming from.
Totally get
but it's
it.
just like, if you just don't pay attention to that,
Right.
you wouldn't.
Right.
You wouldn't.
I feel like everybody's life would be better if they just didn't go on. Like, just look at your mentions on Twitter.
Right.
No, don't even do that. It's strictly bad.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. Anyway, we're kind of talking about some horror-related things. And like I said, this is going to be a vampire-heavy show. Blood, I'm excited to talk to you about, because I've played some of it as well, Vampire the Masquerade Swansong, which I don't mean to be leading here, but this was a game where you and I kind of, on the podcast, you got me hyped on it, because you were like, oh, this is an RPG, it's not just going to be a visual novel, there's going to be some character stat stuff, and you really put it on my radar, and ever since then, I've been kind of keeping an eye on this and really looking forward to playing it. And I'm a couple of hours in, 2, 3, I don't know how long exactly, but I really like it.
Yeah.
Like I am engrossed.
That is not where I thought that was going to go.
Yeah.
Having seen the Metacritic score.
Yeah, I don't know. So I purposely tried to stay away from that.
At all on
I
that,
won't say anything.
To have it.
I've already said too much.
The ghost.
I've already said too much. I'm sorry.
I'm curious to read what those negative opinions are, but outside of one thing that I will talk about, I find the world really engrossing.
Yeah, so I feel like coming into this franchise like somebody who's never seen Star Wars and just started watching The Mandalorian.
Dude, it's
like
yeah. Yes.
So wait, you have no familiarity with Vampire the Masquerade?
I've heard of all of it. I've never.
Oh,
Same.
wow.
Yeah. Outside of like Blood Hunt
wow.
and like knowing what the Masquerade is, like knowing like the most bare bones basics.
Okay.
So like I
excited
don't
to
know
hear
who's
what
a
you think
recurring
then.
character. I don't know anything about
But this game is so overwhelming where they will just like there is so much goddamn World of Darkness jargon that they will just say, and they have a codex.
Yeah.
And so, and not insignificant amount of my time will be like, okay, they said this thing. Like, what do they mean by child? Okay.
Yeah. The beckoning or whatever.
Yeah.
What's a Ventru?
The child and sire, I thought that was pretty natural to figure out.
Well, some of the codex entries are like one sentence, and then others are like
400 years of history.
Yeah. It's so much history, and so it's like I'll either consult the codex or I'll do a quick Google search. But yeah,
I mean,
a lot
even
of it has been looking at
just
terms.
the Masquerade is like a deeply complicated thing.
Oh, it's complex. Let me tell you about the unification between the Hartford Chancery and the Prince of Boston.
Yeah, the princes, and oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is amazing to me.
Yeah. But anyway, Blood, I cut you off. Keep going.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, to me, regardless of trying to catch up on this world, and so so that's the thing is like at first, like I felt like I had to get to a certain point just because it's so dense at the beginning and it's just so much dialogue and story and and like referring to the events that are going on. But regardless of whether I care about the franchise after this, the fact is that the gameplay to me, I feel like I'm just playing like a lower budget version of Detroit Become Human. And
I can definitely see that.
yeah, and so there's that whole sense of going around and doing clues and doing dialogue battles, which is interesting how these like there's a winner and there's a loser and you got to try to win, and there's even dice rolls involved in that, which is very fascinating to me. But yeah, it's just that idea of solving cases, and working your way through this larger narrative. Because basically what happens is, so there's this unification that he was talking about, and they have this party to celebrate.
Okay.
And then something happens at the party, and they issue a code red, and so everyone has to come to the court. And so it's like figuring out, like, okay, who issued the code red? Why did this happen? Did the party get attacked? Like, all of these questions. Okay, who was organizing the party, and is it their fault? Like, like what exactly went down? And so they're just trying to unravel all of that, as well as dealing with like all the internal politics of all the people that are in charge and all of that kind of thing, and people vying for power, and again, like those histories, those relationships between one person's child is now kind of like in authority over them in a way, but they still kind of put them in their places. Like, yeah.
Isla, I know something that is very big for you is when a game respects the player's intelligence, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think a good comparison between like what type of game this is would be Disco Elysium.
Okay. Okay.
In terms of like how it presents its characters and its situation, and then what you can infer from interactions. I think it's kind of the same thing here, where it doesn't do the thing where it babies you and they're like, okay, we're going to explain every relationship that this character has in their entire history. It's like they're just showing this character as they are in the situation that they're currently in. And then the more time that you spend with them and the more you poke at things, you slowly start to unfurl, not only like political intrigue, but also deeper character dynamics. Like there's three main characters that you play, and you switch between them, and you can choose who you select when.
Okay.
And one of the characters that you play, MM, I was like, oh, she was involved in a romantic relationship with this other woman, but
I'm in.
You don't get that right away, and the way that you find out about it, you're like, oh, okay, I can see, like, these two characters feel completely differently about each other, and like the way that they think about each other is completely different. And so when you're getting her perspective versus the other perspective, it makes sense that they're completely different. And I think that depending on who you play as, just the vibe is different and who you can interact with. But the thing that's great is there are points that you invest in, and that will allow you to do different things, right? So you might be able to, rather than like needing a code to get into something or like a key card, if your technology skill is up enough, you can just bypass it. But I never feel like the decisions that I'm making are wrong. Like whether I miss something or whether I build my character a certain way as opposed to another way, I feel like it's just like, this is just my story. I don't feel like, oh man, like, I have to reload because this doesn't feel right. Like everything still feels right.
That
so
feels
far.
very true to Vampire the Masquerade, like historically. Like
interesting. I'm
obviously
curious to hear about this.
Yeah, as a teen, so I have a decent amount of experience with Vampire the Masquerade. As a teen, we played the tabletop RPG a good amount. I was a Malkavian, of course, which are like the crazy ones.
Okay.
And
we got one of those.
Yeah, my character broke their foot trying to kick a door in, like in our first thing. So for the rest of the campaign, I had like this broken foot. Anyway, and then obviously one of my favorite games of all time is Bloodlines 1. And so stats and like balancing that stuff and making choices, like what I've loved about it's good in Bloodlines is like, if you have the stat for this, you're like a god. If you don't have the stat for another thing, you like can't do it.
Right.
And it's like really interesting in that way. But like you said, none of it feels wrong. And like it did a really good job of letting you approach things in different ways and try different tactics.
Yeah. So I think really one early example that you do with the Malkavian named Laisha is so she's going around just trying to get information on the other members of the court. The Primogen, I guess, is the word for it. We want to get into the terminology.
Sure.
But anyways, but she crosses paths with MM and one of the other characters. And so it's interesting because she's in this room and she's like, just disguising herself. She's just invisible at the moment. But like right when MM walks in, she starts having this premonition. And so you have this option of like, either like give in and witness the premonition or eavesdrop on their conversation, which you had in the other character's chapter.
Okay.
And so, and then based on, if which of those things, which set of information you get, that's what you can tell the prince.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, but it's interesting because it's a decision where whether giving into the premonition or witnessing the conversation, both of them feel equally valuable. So again, they don't necessarily feel wrong, but I gave into the premonition. I don't know.
Premonition for sure.
I gave into the premonition, and it's crazy because you have the premonition, and then she just kind of comes back, and they're gone.
Yeah.
Like it's like you're in a completely different state, right, than you were prior to the premonition.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
So you
cool It's cool to. The Malkavians have always felt kind of, because you could pick Malkavian in Bloodlines, and like, it's nice to hear that because like, lore-wise and narratively, the stuff that are supposed to happen to Malkavians, like in Bloodlines, couldn't really happen because it's like, well, you're playing a game, you can't just suddenly fall victim to like a mental state. But it's interesting that they're doing that, which is cool.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to dive into this so hard because I am really connecting with it. Because it's funny that you mentioned the Malkavian stuff because, like, there's this guy that talks about, like, why would we trust you? You just got out of the loony bin.
Right.
Like, the prince is only trotting you out because she needs your premonitions, right? And so you get that discrimination and just kind of view based on your heritage, right? But then you talk to the prince.
Which is big in Vampire the Masquerade.
You talk to the prince, and the prince seems like she's on your side, right? So she's like, I only trust you. I need you. And so, again, you're like, is the prince just playing me for a fool? Like, is this guy just an asshole? Like, I love that uncertainty of decisions. Like, it really doesn't feel like, oh, well, this is clearly the truth, right?
Yeah, the gray areas and the politicking in Vampire is always like the fun stuff where it's like it's amazing to run around and like turn invisible and jump at stuff and whatever, but like not being able to trust anyone, everyone's half crazy, like nobody is good. It's awesome.
Yeah, so after you get past sort of the introduction to where like everybody's like at the court at the same time, you all kind of get sent out on the different missions. And so that's what Ben was talking about you basically pick which chapter you want to do first. So I went to Caleb's chapter first.
Interesting. I did MM.
Okay.
And I did MMs and then I stopped.
Yeah, so I'm just about to start MMs.
It's very good.
Yeah, so I definitely don't want to get into spoilers because I think one of the craziest things to me with his chapter is just how missable so much of it is.
The same thing with MMs.
Just absolutely, because it's like I had gotten to a point where like all of the quote unquote goals had been checked off and I could just leave. But I'm like, no, I know that there's more here.
Yeah.
I can tell that there's more here, and so I just kept poking around until I found out, got to the bottom of what my like instincts were. And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting with this is because it's like you really have to be in that place where you're willing to just let it all sink in.
Yes.
Take your time with it.
That's
because
100% true.
So much of the things that come up with puzzles is, to me, feels very naturally written. I felt like there are answers to a puzzle that were like in a girl's diary, essentially, but you only got like a piece of it there. And you're just reading her diary and all this stuff, and then if you read that, then when you get something else, then you realize like, oh, okay, there's information here that I can use. And so like a lot of these kinds of things is like, okay, there's sort of a clue in this room, there's sort of a clue in that room, and it wasn't until like I had kind of done like a little bit of a second pass that I realized like, oh, that's what this means, that's what this is about, and then that led to opening up a whole other thing that wasn't part of any kind of checklist, but was just super important.
I would actually say the puzzles, and I will use two specific examples, have been by far the most frustrating and gamey in a very bad and almost like old school bad kind of way, where they just like in the opening chapters, there's a code that you can get to access a computer. And the way that you get the code, I was like, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And like reading through everything and thinking like, oh, am I going to have to like puzzle something out in a way that like feels clever and that I'm really having to pay attention? And then not realizing that in this one thing that you can interact with, once you click on it, if you pan the camera up in like black Sharpie, it's just on a photograph in a way that's like very obvious and doesn't require any intelligence.
Missed it and just like hacked in or something.
Yeah, it didn't require any intelligence. But far worse than that is in the MM chapter, and I won't go into spoilers, you have to do this 3 times in a row where there's this elevator and there's 3 circles surrounding kind of the center point. And you just have to turn the circles in a way where it forms a line. And so you do it, and it's really tedious. And MM is like, oh, I have to do it again. And then you do it, and it's really tedious. And then you go up to the third one. She's like, I better hope this is the last one. And you're just like, this just doesn't need to be here. Like, this is just so, like, it feels like a bad survival horror element puzzle that, like, doesn't do a great job of blending with other elements of the game, or making like you feel like you're just. I felt like I was just kind of spinning this thing around until I got it in a way that just wasn't satisfying, which sucks because I think there are other elements of the game that are so smart and so cool, where like there are things that you can miss in this area that I was in, and I had the sense that I was missing them, but I didn't know where they were, and so I continued on ahead because the place that I was in was very abstract and weird. And then at the end screen, they're like, hey, you didn't get all this stuff. And I was like, I got the sense that you were telling me that without coming out, right, and spelling it out for me. I had, like, without, I guess spelling it out for me maybe is wrong, but without, like, having that, like an objective marker or something. Or, like, you can feed on rats, right, because some of your abilities.
My dude wouldn't do it. He's like too good for it or something.
Some of them, yeah. Are you like a Tremere, a Ventrue or something?
Ventrue.
I think,
I think Caleb's a Ventrue.
They're like highfalutin classes. They won't feed on rats, yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny because they're in the level and there's a button prompt, but he's like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas like Nosferatu, are like the ugly, gnarly ones who live in like the sewers. They
Boy,
pretty
are
much eat
they.
rats. Like, oh yeah, they're gnarly looking.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so funny. Like that's the kind of stuff where it's just like they're super highfalutin and staunch and like
But we should talk about that because
Well, I want to.
Yeah.
I want to just very quickly elaborate on the rat thing because you have powers that you can use. And in MM's case, she can blink, and so there are different points in the level where you can blink. But if you do that, it makes your hunger go up, and you don't want your hunger to go up all the way.
otherwise you'll fall into torpor.
Yeah, I didn't do it, so I don't know exactly what will happen. But it's like they lose control or something.
Yeah, it's like death crazy.
Yeah, so they like would. It's the way it's described in the tutorial or whatever is that like if their hunger goes all the way up, then they're just gonna like grab somebody and feed on them, even if the context is inappropriate or whatever. There's whoever's like within arm's reach.
Yes, but this is what I love about it, right? Because the game, and this would have been a totally fine mechanic. The game could have just been like, okay, you have these powers. You can feed on rats to lower your hunger. Don't let your hunger go up all the way. It could have stopped there. But then as I was doing it, the first time I did it, MM was like, this is disgusting, but it'll have to do, right? Because she's trapped in this prison. And then I did it again because I was like, oh, I don't want my hunger to go up. And the game was like, you raised your suspicion, right? If you keep eating rats, like, people are going to think less of you.
Right.
And so not only did I have this, like, number mechanic, like don't let your hunger go all the way up, that was pressuring against me. I had this whole like psychological, social aspect where I was like, oh, I don't want to do this unless I absolutely have to because it will change my standing. You know, I haven't seen how it plays out, right? Like, but just the idea of it having a social impact is really, really cool.
Societal pressures, like a huge thing. And that, also the thing you were saying about the puzzle, if you're, we say this all the time, and I imagine we're going to talk about this again in a minute. But Huber and I were saying it about Little Witch in the Woods the other day, where it's like, if your character in your game is saying, this is boring, or this is like an RPG fetch quest, that doesn't make it okay to have it in your game. Just cut it out. Just cut it out of your game.
It felt like such blatant padding in a game that was doing a good job of not having that, where, because like I think what Blood was alluding to, when I would stumble upon a new character's room and like kind of get a sense of their personality and uncover files and learn more about the history or how this person operates or how these groups interact with each other, it's so interesting. And so you feel like you get rewarded for poking around.
I feel like the level design, the room design that I've seen so far has been just like immaculate.
Yes, it's
like
been,
They have so much about this person is into music, so they've got saxophones on their glass.
Room is so good. Yeah.
There's the other.
So do you like walk around in this, or
yes,
is it visual?
yes,
okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was like, is this a visual novel or what is it?
Detroit Becomes Human, like especially the chapter I just did feels very much like the opening chapter of Detroit.
So it's 3D, not 2D. It's
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just like haven't
and like
seen it at all.
The acting and the models are a little jank, but
sure.
You know,
it's funny because I think like visually when things are kind of standing still, I think the character models look really good and I think the environments look really good. It's just the animations that can sometimes be a little awkward or uncanny valley with stuff.
I looked at the score. It wasn't quite as bad as I had seen before.
Okay.
It's gone up a bit, I think.
But so back with the hunger thing, right? So there's two problems with when you get to the hunger up. One is that like you're saying, you kind of go into that frenzy state. The other thing is like if your hunger is so high up, then you just can't do certain things. They'll be blocked out because you don't have enough meter left to be able to like do that skill, right? And so without going into exactly what happened, basically when I got to the end of this chapter, there was a moment where I had to make a bunch of quick decisions, kind of like almost like cinematic QuickTime event kind of thing. And so one of the first people that I came across, I had the option to use a skill or to feed on them. And I should have fed on them.
Oh, because then
then there was this other sequence of events, and then I was like, I was out of skill points, and then I was forced into the other choices, but because I didn't have the skill points to make the other choices. And that, I'm in a place where I'm like, I just really, like, I went from a place of like, this is going to be great. I found something that was cool and super secret, and it's going to make a big difference. And then I blew it hard.
I love that can happen, though. That's cool.
At the end of MM's chapter, you're kind of confronting this person, and you need to convince this person that you and your people are not a threat, and you kind of need to make atone. You kind of have to atone for what happened. And I always find it, I can imagine this is tremendously difficult as a developer, where like if you do invest in skill points, right, in something like maybe you're really good at persuasion or you're really good at technology or whatever it is, like you want that to be useful and you do want to give the player an advantage. But I think it's really boring where if you're like, well, I'm just going to bump up my persuasion and then I can just steamroll conversations because if I pick the persuasion thing, like it will always be a good outcome. Like that's just not interesting, and that's not, you know, how it doesn't really feel real, I guess, in a way. And what I liked about the kind of the confrontation that you have with this person where you're trying to convince them that you're not a threat, it's kind of a mix where I felt like I was using some of my skills and that gave me an advantage, but ultimately what I ended up offering to bring to the table, it was just a regular option, right? I was just like, based on what I know about the situation, this seems like the most logical choice.
Yeah.
And it appeased this person, but it will probably piss off my boss. And so it was like this wonderful, like it got me out of this situation, but was an imperfect solution that wasn't solely based on I have the higher number, which I love.
Yeah, that's something I found was really interesting because I don't know if you've done any dialogues like this, but I got one that was basically like it was like a 3-step dialogue, and it was like you basically have to win 2 out of 3. You get like
that's
one
exactly,
chance to miss.
That's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to get the security guard to open this dumpster for me, right? Because there was evidence in there that I really needed to check out, and
Very Disco Elysium.
And it turned out that the security guard was what they call a Fin blood.
Okay,
like a vampire that's just not good enough to be
like,
part of society.
Like a daywalker kind of, like
Yeah.
like Blade, but less cool.
And, and so he immediately recognized me when I walked in, and he knows that I'm there on the prince's orders, but he's still resisting. He's like, no, I don't want to open that for you. And like, dude, I'm telling you to open the freaking dumpster. But you have this thing where it's like you have to like win the best 2 out of 3. And it's really interesting because you're saying is like sometimes there will be those like skill-based dialogue options.
Yeah.
But you can't really like spread your points out to have like all of those different things.
Right.
Because and then another, like he would have like higher points in that thing anyway. So even if I had like a little bit of thing, I don't have enough to like convince him or sway him.
Does it show you their points versus your points?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But there's a whole nother layer to conversations which you haven't even touched on yet, where you have to spend a certain amount of points to even do certain options.
Yeah.
But then they're like, there is a chance that the person that you're talking to
Can
will
raise
use
their
focus.
points. Yeah.
And so you like, not only do you have your base chance to succeed, there's another chance on top of that it's going to be even harder. And so you're like, do I spend more points to overcome the chance that they're even better?
I like that they're leaning into the actual like World of Darkness mechanics, it sounds like. And it sounds like the NPCs and stuff are playing by the same rules that you are, which I always really appreciate.
Right.
Yeah, because if you come up to a tie, that's when it does a dice roll.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you both have the same amount of points in something.
I don't know anything about the tabletop game, but it feels like
Yeah.
it is pulled directly from that. That's the impression that I get.
Picture D&D that leans a little more story and less numbersy.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, where it's like you have your skills, they help you with stuff. There's never a wrong answer, really. Like things will just lead into different outcomes. Sort of. It's broad strokes.
Swansong is giving me the impression that Vampire the Masquerade is almost entirely about manipulation and deceit.
Oh yeah. Vampire, like World of Darkness, is the like kind of framework of several things. There's like werewolf and mage and whatever. But Vampire is more about like social deception, like hierarchies of class structure and like social pressures and stuff like that. And it's all about that stuff.
But yeah, like you were saying though, Ben, what was interesting to me about the way that my conversation went down is that ultimately the things that got me to win were not the skill-based options, or just trying to like force my way through or intimidate them or something. It's just like, okay, no, this actually feels like a logical thing I can say, and I managed to to get past them and get what I needed.
It sounds like this game could do things, and maybe it does, that I really like in games that I want to see more of, and I feel like it's there sometimes in like Fallout or Mass Effect or something, where it's like, because normally it's like most games, it's like, okay, my persuasion skill is X, I get the extra dialogue thing that's just like a home run, like it just is amazing. I like it when like occasionally you get a line that's just kind of like a fuck it line, where it's just like, my character is like bitchy enough to say this, and my skill in that area is so high that you just kind of like watch the world burn with a line where you're just like, this isn't going to make it win, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
And like my character would do this, like kind of just, I don't know how to, if I'm conveying the idea I mean, but like lines that are kind of like fit your character, fit the skills that you have, but don't just automatically pass the check, but just make things more interesting and weird.
Yeah, one thing it's interesting too is that the based on what you discover or what conversations you have, you also get these traits that unlock, and they can be positive or negative.
Oh yeah.
And so like in one of Caleb's earlier chapters, I was talking to his child, which, like as I said, like he'd like kind of risen in the ranks above him because he's more like that kind of a guy, right? He's like hungry for power. And
he's so awful.
He is.
I hate him.
And I talked to that guy, I was just talking to that guy for a while, and he like basically got in this place where he was sort of putting me down. And then I got a trait called Chatterbox that lowered like one of my stats a little bit.
Oh, I got that same trait. Yeah.
So it's been a few years, but if I recall, that's kind of like feats in D&D where like, but you can get traits that some of them can be bad, but they'll give you a skill point back. So like you can take a negative modifier to get a skill point that you can then put into persuasion or whatever in the paper game, if memory serves. So that sounds like that's kind of like that, but it's emerging naturally through what you do. Yeah,
another neat little thing that I came across is sometimes there'll be like basically consumable items that like will give you like temporary skill points. So like for instance, there's like a key card, and I could use that key card and I would get like a +1 to my technology stat, but only for like the next thing that I use it on, and then it would go back down.
I think the best role-playing games are when you're playing as characters that can't win every situation.
Yes,
right? Like that have a unique perspective specifically because of their limitations, which I find so interesting. The other thing that I want to talk about is it's also really boring in RPGs where like you have a good route and a bad route, but they're so on opposite extremes, right? When you choose the good route, you're just the savior of everyone and everyone loves you. And when you choose the bad route or the renegade route, you're just a total asshole.
Paragon Renegade, I was thinking that.
Right. Early on, MM can kind of sell out her friend, but it's not like the way that you learn about it and the way that it comes together is it's not like you're just throwing your friend under the bus. It's like, no, I want you to go and confront the situation because I don't think they'll have any evidence against you, and I think you'll be okay, right? That's way more interesting than just stabbing somebody in the back very quickly and abruptly, right? And so it's like, oh, I'm selling out my friend, but I think this will ultimately be the better outcome for both of us.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, because you have the choice of like, okay, because you're basically sent to go get her, right? Because they think she might be responsible for what happened by making some kind of mistake. And it's like, you have that choice of like, okay, you can actually go and walk her back to the prince and they can do their investigation, or you guys can just try to run.
And, and this is where the 3 character structure comes into play, because the prince has the Malkovian who can disguise herself. She's like, here's the key to people's apartments, like go and snoop around.
Right.
And so you go and you snoop around and you come back and you're like, I have no evidence that the person that you're questioning caused any amount of trouble.
So the order that you do them in might influence your decisions.
Well, in that part,
that part you're stuck in order, but I don't know about later.
Okay.
At that part, it's dictating when you play them. But yeah, later on you get to choose.
Because I mean, yeah, if you go and literally don't find evidence, and then as MM you can kind of metagame it and be like, they don't have evidence or whatever, whoever it was.
And then kind of like I was saying about the apartment scene and that, and investigating in there, like a lot of it is very much just knowledge based.
Yeah,
it's like know what's happened because you've uncovered these things. So to me, like there's a little bit of that Outer Wilds element to it, where it's like, oh, because I know this, then I can go do this like right away.
You guys are getting me interested.
It takes a minute to like read this stuff and like,
I think
this
you would
is
love
here
this
for
game.
a reason. This is here for a
out.
reason. This is telling me something. Where the crap is it?
Man, I want you guys to play Bloodlines 1 because I would be fascinated. I mean,
I've been
obviously
meaning to
it's
for such a long time.
It's an older game.
Oh, I don't
and
care
like
about that. Yeah.
Right. And like I've said this a million times, but like if you buy it on Steam, at least when I did, you have to get like a crack from a German website just to make it run.
So
and
I
it's
have
like
it
you
on
bought
GOG.
it. Okay, if it's on GOG, that's probably better.
Yeah.
Usually.
They tend to make, at least patch it so it'll open, but like oh man, you can also get some like enhanced, I don't know if the GOG version has this, but you can get like the enhanced graphics package, widescreen stuff, like it's great. And also
I was taking that Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition for a spin, and oh my.
Oh,
and it's so good.
And like they keep putting stuff into it, and the audio is Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition, chef's kiss. But similarly, Bloodlines, the stuff that people have done to it over the years made it way better. Also, having played it when it came out on a PC from, I don't even know, what year was that?
I think it was like early 2000s.
Yeah, it was like
2004.
Yeah, that fits somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And like the load times were insane on my computer, and now they're just instant, and it's like such a different experience.
That's so funny.
Oh my god!
But
like going from the sewer to the town would take literally like 2 minutes.
From the outside looking in, Vampire the Masquerade, just the basic concept of vampires living among you and them trying to not let mortals find out what's going on. Like all that stuff was really, really interesting to me. And I feel like I've kind of like done a trial by fire with Swansong where I'm like constantly looking stuff up. Like, what is this? What is this? What is this? But now that I've kind of done that legwork, I'm so interested and in love with what's going on. Like I've been meaning to play Bloodlines. I've talked about it a couple of times. I've been meaning to play it for so long, but now I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do it.
It's an interesting conundrum with a game like this because, like, as the developer, I guess you have to figure most of the people who are going to play it are going to be diehard Vampire the Masquerade fans.
Yeah.
And so if you were explaining Torpor and the Prince and everything, it would bore them to tears.
Yeah.
And they would be like, ugh, I know. But then, like, on the flip side, newbies have to, like, Destiny 2 grimoire everything, and you're just like, what's going on?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally think this is not a game for everyone. I think there is a large percentage of the gaming population that's going to be too much. It's going to be too overwhelming. And it's a slow game.
Yeah.
You're walking around, looking at stuff, talking to people, constantly getting lore. That's what you're doing.
But that's why I think it's actually like fine, like just coming into this because
I think you can.
Because I I am concerned with the immediate events, the immediate mystery of things,
right?
Yes,
and like I can pop into that codex a little here and there if I have a question, but like I don't feel like I need to like learn everything. Like I it's totally fine.
Yes. I think it is very well done. I don't mean that as a knock against the game, but Bloodworth, you are also somebody that, correct me if I'm wrong, knows some Elvish from Lord of the Rings. Okay? So I think this game is for a type of, like, does the idea of making
it's a reader game,
a character sheet, does that excite you? Do you like the word lore? Have you ever entertained the thought about DMing? Like if you are that type of person, I think this is just shoot it right in my veins. Did you like Disco Elysium?
Right.
That kind of. I mean, I have to tell you this. You would super appreciate this. No. It's very funny. I love this game's sense of humor because you read this report from is like the security guy, and they're talking about like how just they talk about humans like they're cattle in such a funny way where they're like, oh, like we have more humans than ever, but just the general quality of human is going down. And they just say it point blank.
Here. I agree.
It's such a like nihilistic, funny way that I really appreciated. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and when I was searching the apartment, it was so funny because there was like there's like a examine button on like the laundry basket, and the laundry basket there were clothes around it, right? And he's like, the idea of a laundry basket is just like an abstract concept to some people.
I didn't get that. That's interesting.
Well, because it's in the
I see.
it's in the Caleb chapter.
Now you see why Vampire the Masquerade might have spoken to me as a very depressed, confused teen.
It's speaking to me now. Yeah. No, I think that it's sometimes you run into those games or those things, and I think World of Darkness might be that for me right now, where it's just like the right thing at the right time.
Yeah.
Because I found out that a game that I played with a friend that I enjoyed, Hunter the Reckoning, I had no idea that was this old ass original Xbox game was connected to all of this. Yeah.
Funny.
It's a wide umbrella.
Yeah.
This world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And,
what were you
I was
saying?
just saying that there was just something about like, again, the whole way that you're searching this apartment for clues. And while you're doing that, you're learning about this family. You were learning about their relationships and the struggles that they've been having and the recent things that are going on. And like basically the challenges that come with, catering to working with vampires, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's interesting because like you really, again, like you don't need to know everything that's been going on in this universe to be like,
right.
This is what's going on with this family,
Right.
and the nuances of it.
Right. I think that is a point that you've made abundantly clear, but as much as I'm enjoying learning about the rules of this world and what all the terminology means, I think the only reason that I care is because I'm immediately interested in these characters. I'm immediately interested in what happened at this party, and I feel like the shroud of mystery that it's casting is intriguing in the sense that, like, it's not one of those situations where you're like, well, this probably happened, or this person is responsible.
Yeah.
It presents itself with enough craftsmanship where I'm like, anything could have happened here, and I want to find out what specifically it was. And even when I find that out, is that going to be a slanted view of what actually happened based on the decisions that I made, right? And that's a fascinating situation to be put in as a player, I think.
Do you play with a controller? Or is it point and click or what?
You can do either.
You can do either one, but
okay.
I'm playing with the controller.
I'm playing with mouse and
Basically-
keyboard, but it's like
Okay.
one of those games where whatever control. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not.
Basically, like,
Not a
can
lot
you
of
play it on a
dexterity.
Steam Deck is my question.
Yeah,
'Cause I
yeah.
tried.
I think so.
I tried Song of Conquest on there, Songs of Conquest, whatever, and like it works, but it's very mouse heavy, and it was difficult.
It is
to
Epic
play on the Steam Deck.
exclusive if you want to play
okay.
on PC,
Ah.
which I know you can get running on the Steam Deck. But I just
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to-
Right.
It's a real
yeah,
headache.
that's, yep.
Blood, I'm so glad that, because like I said, I purposely didn't look at the critical reception other than when I was Googling things, seeing like this PC game place, give it this. So I had this enthusiasm, but it was one of those games where I'm like, am I just crazy? Like, is this, like I said, is this just the right thing for me right now? So it's nice to see that enthusiasm.
That might be a theme
Well, it
of
took
this
me-
episode.
To me,
of
like it
Frame
really
Trap.
took me doing that like first like chapter beyond the intro.
Yeah.
To really
Yes.
get there
I
because
totally
I just
agree.
felt so lost before that.
I totally agree.
It's like trying to absorb everything. Yeah.
Well, the intro had me worried because it was interesting, but when you play as all three of the characters in the intro, you're in a very confined place. And I was like, is it just going to kind of look like this? And then I did MM's first chapter, and I'm so excited for you to see it. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, you go.
Oh yeah, just where it starts is like I missed something.
You go weird places,
Yeah.
in a way that was really cool. I am so excited to talk to Isla about Dolmen
Oh,
because
I did. Man, this whole episode is like, why do I love this game that sucks? Like,
yeah, okay. I've not played Dolmen, so you're the authoritative person
Well-
here. But everything that I've seen on it, which is not
Huber
much,
put
it's
a
like
few
it's
hours
like
in
a
this week too. Yeah.
Yeah.
it's like a snippet on Steam. I was like, I just it wasn't clicking with me.
Yeah, here's the deal with Dolmen. Like, Huber and I played a preview build, gosh, I don't know, 8 months ago, like 7 or 6, I don't know. Feels like years ago.
Some time ago.
Yeah, 100,000 years ago, back when Elden Ring came out. So 1997.
2004.
Yeah. And we at like the first 20 minutes of playing this thing, we were like, this game is garbage. Like it's not like the controls are weird. Like the enemies like don't convey impact or timing or what's going on, and like it's clunky and strange. And then like enhanced by the fact that we were sitting next to each other, I think. Like
just saying Dolmen, dude.
Just saying Dolmen, dude. Like, and the fact that we legitimately were saying Dolmen, like up front, like this is the silliest word. Like this word is just bizarre. And we were like kind of making fun of it. But then by the end of it, like the word kept taking on new meaning. And so like 20 or 30 minutes into playing it, we were like, wait, this is kind of sick. Like, why am I having so much fun? And like mechanics started to click. Yeah, and we were playing it for a while. We were just going to play for 40 minutes or something for an easy update. We ended up playing it for like an hour and a half or 2 hours. And at the press demo that we got, after you beat the first little boss, it hard cut. We had a new character, and we were like halfway through the game, like halfway leveled up, just for the press, preview. And then we open a door, and it's like this insane place, huge, wide open thing, in comparison to just all the tiny little crappy hallways that we were doing before. And like these big laser beam like worms were in this, like on top of buildings, just like shooting things down, and like everything was crazy. We had dual blades now, so we were like, oh, okay, there are different weapons, different builds. This world gets wild. So
Smart thing for a press demo to do.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with the experience of the press demo, and we knew that we were like, if we're lucky, this is a 7, right? Like, it's a fun game, it's a ridiculous game, but the budget is so apparent. Like, the intro cutscene and the energy of the narration and stuff is just like, I don't know where the developers are from, but it kind of seems like, okay, they didn't have a lot of money. Maybe they're not like a Western company, or like English isn't the first language, perhaps, I don't know. But like
it reminds me of the Tormented Souls VO.
Yeah.
Where like to this day, I don't know if it was intentional or not.
Oh yeah. It has that vibe, except Dolmen's like intro video has the energy of like you're about to go into a multiplayer match on like a shooter. It is weird. The tone is all over the place. And like partway through the first zone, you find a little chunk of a dolmen, which in this reality is like a weird crystal thing. Whereas the word dolmen, I think, is it's like a Stonehenge, it's like a tomb, it's a rock, like lithic kind of thing. But then it just cuts to like a very lengthy cutscene of this dude with 2 big swords, one with ice powers and one with fire powers, fighting this giant spider with a crystal in its head, and like going all over the place, and like it's hard to tell what's really going on, and then like he hits the crystal and a chunk falls out and then lands where it is, and then it cuts back to real time, and you're like, oh, okay, that's what I'm looking at. I had a vision, I guess, of what happened.
Sounds like a fever dream.
Yeah, this game feels like a fever dream. It is so wild. And like I played, so they sent us some codes, and I played through that first boss because I was curious to see what would actually happen in the game. I got a bunch of points, leveled up, and then, obviously it doesn't cut you to the middle of the game. You just keep exploring, and that's kind of where I was at now. And like the magic is sort of gone, like by myself anyway. I imagine if I was sitting next to Huber again and we were just handing it off on deaths and playing it, it would be a lot more fun. Right now, I believe this game has like a 58 or 59 on Metacritic, which feels maybe right. And it's kind of a shame because Dolmen, like, it's one of those things where you're just like, oh, almost like
Right.
it's everything about it just suffers from not having enough money, I think.
Well,
Because the scope and the ambition is huge.
Right.
Well, one of the things that I like the details that like to me just it felt like it said so much about the game is why I was like watching Huber for a little bit yesterday, and he had picked up a greatsword and was messing around with that. But the greatsword was like going so far above your character's head when you're just like carrying it around, and it just clips through doors.
Oh yeah,
Like you just walk through the door and like it's like you know what, we're not gonna worry about it.
yeah, which like is sort of quaint, and like I kind of like. It's hard to talk about a game like Dolmen, right? Because it's like I don't want to rag on it, and like obviously I used the word garbage before, but it's like I was being kind of facetious. Like obviously there's a lot in it to like. I want to talk about the things I like. I want to caution people, because I feel like we, Dolmen Dude became like a meme, and like we we legitimately had a fun time. We weren't like faking that. We weren't drumming that up or whatever. But like at the end of that, we were like, we're lucky if this is a 7. Like if this is a 7, like that'll be the perfect play. It'll have achieved what it could, for the budget and the scope and the
Right.
ambition. And I think it maybe falls a little below that without having beaten it or anything right now. But yeah, it's funny because it's like 2 parts cautionary tale, 2 parts it's kind of cute. I don't know.
I feel like what you're saying has gotten me more excited than I've been so far, because I would much rather play something and then walk away from it being it is objectively terrible but interesting
Yeah.
than like technically good but boring, right?
Yeah.
And if it just goes weird places, that's kind of cool to me. I mean, if it was like, I don't know how much it is, but if it's like $60, maybe not at that price
Yeah,
point.
I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure. I don't want to speculate, but
I think the thing that is
it would be
so
bonkers if they tried to sell this for $60, kind of.
so hard, and why I immediately tune out when somebody says it's like Monster Hunter is like, I don't need anything like Monster Hunter.
Right.
Monster Hunter is killing it
Yeah.
constantly with content, right? And so when you say like it's a Souls-like, and you're coming out in the same year as like a seismic game like Elden Ring,
The greatest Souls-like that ever happened.
I think it's just that comparison only hurts you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, what separates Dolmen, I think, obviously setting and tone is more sci-fi, which
Yeah.
things
Your
like the
character looks like the Dead
Surge.
Space guy.
Yeah. Things like maybe like the Surge kind of did a little better, but what's kind of interesting here is there's this elemental kind of angle. So far I've seen fire, ice, and acid that you can put on weapons and guns.
I think those might be the 3.
That
I
might
could
be
wrong,
it. That
though.
might be it. And so you can put those on your weapons, and you have a reactor that can basically like, the game doesn't explain it very well, but you basically can go into like a super mode for a little bit, and that's the element of that mode, I think. And if you switch to the element that the enemies you're dealing with are weak to, you really tell a difference. And like the game sort of explains it, but not very well. And in the first area, you're dealing with these insects, and you start with a fire weapon, your gun anyway, and that doesn't really do
you
much
start with
against
ice.
them. Yeah, maybe it varies by character. Because in the preview, we started with ice, and we were wrecking shop. I chose the dual blade character, and I started with fire in the real game. But then I immediately switched to an ice pistol when I could teleport back to the ship and do that. You build up like an elemental weakness bar on an enemy, and then if you hit their weakness, like if you get it to 100%, they'll freeze and slow down or whatever, which is like hugely important, and like against these spider things really does great. And then against the next group of enemies, it doesn't do anything pretty much. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. You can like swap them out and balance that, and you're getting parts to make new things, and it's like about crafting.
And then
Weapons and stuff.
Your gun, that's the same pool of energy as your healing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's actually my favorite thing in Dolmen. So the way healing works and the way your weapon works is you have a blue bar of energy. It's called energy, but it's kind of like mana, I guess, but no, energy is the right word. That's the one they use. So if you shoot your gun, your energy goes down, like the bright blue goes down, but it leaves dark blue under it, so that'll recharge. And so every shot of your gun goes down a little bit, the bright blue, but it comes back fairly quickly. If you heal with, of course, square, Estus Flask button, it'll chop the energy down in half, and that doesn't come back from that. So it's kind of this cool interplay of like, okay, with a full energy bar, I've got 40 shots or 20 shots or whatever with my gun, and I can heal twice. But when I heal once, then I've only got 10 shots before I have to sit there and let it recharge, which is kind of a fun interplay, and it gets kind of exciting. And you can really get into spots where you're out of energy batteries, you've healed, and you can't use your gun anymore. So then you kind of just have to do jump attacks and stuff like that, and regular attacks.
See, that's way more interesting to me than the elemental system, because it's like, that's every game.
Every game does that, yeah. But the downside to that is, if you've played enough of these games, and like I had played Dolmen, I had played the first area before up to the first boss. So when I got to the boss this time, what had taken us 4 or 5 tries before, and I eventually beat it the first time when Huber and I were playing it, this time took me 1 try, but it took me 10 minutes because I, halfway through the fight, ran out of bullets and energy, so I couldn't heal and I couldn't shoot, and my health bar was pretty low, so I just like waited it out and like I literally just had to walk left, and it would miss me with every shot. I just waited for it to do its jump attack, and it like stuns for a second. I would jump attack it, hit it a couple of times, back off. Literally the only threat to me at all was the ads that would come out every quarter health bar. And I just had to wait it out. And so it's got me a little worried that that's kind of the game.
Yeah, that sounds a little tedious.
Yeah, I wish I had played more of it, but like it was hard for me to parse because I was feeling kind of bored replaying that first part. And I was kind of thinking, okay, this is just because I've seen this part, I've done this part before. But part of me is kind of worried that no, that's just kind of how it is. And if I'm honest, Rogue Legacy 2 exists, and
we'll get to it.
I've just been playing that. And like, so Dolmen, I played for 3 or 4 hours and didn't feel a desire to keep going. Whereas Rogue Legacy 2, I don't even know. Yeah. So Dolmen, get it on sale? Like, it's not worth trying. But just, I want people to know what they're getting into before they get into it.
Yeah,
like,
that sounds fair.
It's not a terrible game. It's not, like, if anything, it's a bummer because I wish that they had a little more funding and maybe a little more time, because the ambition is cool and the mood is right. And the thing I'm afraid of is that the game starts way worse than it gets, because the later area that we saw with the preview build, and when our character was beefed up more, it was awesome. It was like super cool, visually interesting. The enemies were doing things that were really wild. It felt like a completely different game. Whereas in the first part, you're slowly stumbling through these halls with these spiders that feel either unstoppable or really easy based on your level of knowledge and just like positioning. I don't know, like, because sometimes they get in some pot shots that feel a little untelegraphed. And it gets kind of irritating, but
those opening areas are so essential, because I think about Dark Souls 1 and I think about the Undead Parish, and I'm like, I could do it 100 times, and I feel like I have done it 100 times. I am exaggerating, but no matter how many times I do that area, and I feel like I can even mentally map it out in my head, it's good every time. You know what I mean? Like, it's still like a great exercise in almost everything that game does well.
I mean, that's perfect. Yeah, exactly. Like, I was stuck in Undead Parish or Berg, or whichever. Berg is first, I think. Whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
You know what we're talking about.
Yeah. I was stuck there for like 5 hours, my first playthrough of Dark Souls, and I was loving every minute of it, right? Same with Yharnam, like in the front.
Yharnam is also a great
The
example.
beginning of Bloodborne, it's like, okay, you're stuck here forever, but for some reason, for me at least, it encouraged me to keep going. It didn't incentivize me to stop. Whereas Dolmen, main path, I'm just like, yeah, I get it. And I don't know if that's... Because for me, I have a real problem with Souls-likes that aren't from Software, because they don't have the goodwill built up that From Software has with me. Whereas, like, From Software just oozes control and confidence and, like, quality to me.
Yeah, it's the, like, progenitor versus imitator
Exactly.
thing, where, like, the imitator has to first understand what makes that thing good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, they have to prove to me that they deserve to be a Souls-like kind of. It's like, your mechanics have to be bulletproof. And that's almost never the case. Like Surge, I thought was fun. I played like half of it, you know? I definitely don't beat Souls-likes that aren't from Software typically, because I usually just get what I need and stop.
And leave, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Dolmen, dude.
I feel like this is a game I want to pick up for $5.
Yeah.
That's where I'm walking away with this conversation.
I say this not to try to be insulting.
No. Yeah.
But $5 to $7 is probably fair for what Dolmen is right now. That's not to say that in the future they couldn't patch it and make it a little tighter and like iron out some of the like janky stuff and like make the story a little clearer and the tutorials a little clearer. Like there's a great game in Dolmen. It's not there yet, and I get the sense that it's not, because of bad developers. It's just like limited funds and Sure. So currently I would pay $7.99 maybe max for Dolmen.
I've been playing some of Evil Dead the game.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Which I was very much looking forward to. I haven't even been able to play nearly as much as I would like, but we did a stream of it, which was super fun. And when I did the preview for it, I walked away with kind of the ultimate opinion being like, I love how much this game loves Evil Dead and shows it off exceedingly well, but I'm worried that it is going to get repetitive and that the depth isn't there. And then playing it with you guys, Huber and Blood specifically, I feel much more confident about this game as a whole, with the caveat at the end, which I'll get to, but just leveling up your characters, seeing not only like, because you have like an ultimate level up rate where you'll get experience and then you can do permanent upgrades on any character that you like. There are different character classes. They all have their own abilities, right? So there's a lot going on there. But then also in a match, you will get, it's kind of like Dota in that sense, where you will get this thing called Pink F, and you can level up and build a character just for that match, right? And so you could theoretically have characters that feel very different from each other just based on how you level up in any given match. And what I love is how essential teamwork feels and how much communication matters, where you kind of have like this battle royale beginning where like Blood will be like, I don't have a ranged weapon. And so suddenly, as we're scavenging, all right, there's a ranged weapon for Blood. I ping it on the map. He comes over. Hey, we need Pink F so we can level up. That's really, really important. Make sure you mark it. Hey, your fear is really high, so let's go to a lantern to light the lantern to lower your fear. And so the element of team play is so essential and so crucial, because the demon has powers where it's like, oh, I just want to get this person's fear up so I can possess them and then take over the team, right? You want to stop that from happening. So all that stuff, or like getting in a car will alert the demon to where you are. And so do we want to do that? Do we want to go on foot? So as a survivor, I think all of that stuff is fascinating and just working together. Or like the healer, which Huber was playing, like they have a heal, but it only heals in this circle. So you got to make sure everybody circles up, that you pop it at the right moment, right? And so there's a ton of really interesting decisions that, like, we did a 3-hour stream of it, and like I was way more into it by the end than when I started.
Because your understanding of things evolves, and I think one of the difficult things in a way with this game is it's so important to to play with people that you know.
Yeah.
Because I think as we were playing and as we were learning about our own characters, we were also communicating that information to each other. So it actually became very important to realize that, like, okay, when Huber uses a healing item, then it benefits all of us. Right. So try to ping those for Huber first, because that's going to, like, be a net win. Same thing with, like, the shields and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, just having a good understanding of, like, what everybody's role is. And, like, you were talking about ranged weapons. And, like, you know, I ended up picking a guy that was more melee focused. So it's like, I'm not even going to worry about ranged weapons. Mm-hmm. But if I'd see a chainsaw, it's like, okay, I know only Ben can use that chainsaw. Right. So I'm going to ping that thing and see if he needs it.
Yeah, just the way things blend together. And I've played, so it's asynchronous multiplayer where it's 4v1, so it's 4 survivors versus 1 demon. So kind of a Dead by Daylight structure. And playing as the demon, in theory, I really like it because you have this pool of energy and you need to run around the map to collect the energy. And as you collect energy and as you set up things like traps, you will level up, and so you can build out your character, and you want to level up so you can summon minions and then possess those minions and so on and so forth. So the idea of, it's almost like an RE resistance kind of thing, where I love the idea of creating a plan, right? Being like, okay, I know they have to go after this lost page of the Necronomicon. I'm going to trap the shit out of this place. And then, like, the hope is, right, that they come, they all get afraid, they set up all of my traps, right, and you kind of feel like an evil mastermind. In theory, I love that. And I played a match where eventually I overcame the survivors, but I felt like 2 of the survivors weren't playing that well, and so I was able to overcome them. Then late last night, and admittedly it was like 1 a.m, I like couldn't find a match. It was like taking forever to find a match as the demon. And it was really annoying. And then I finally got into a match, and then somebody disconnected. So then I had to go into another really long queue time. And I queued into a group of survivors where, admittedly, right, like, I am just getting started as the demon. So I'm not saying that I know all the tricks. I'm sure there's plenty of things I could have done better. 100%, I fully acknowledge that. But from that beginner perspective, I felt like I was playing against a team that knew what they were doing, knew their characters, knew the composition, and I felt like I couldn't do anything. Like, I felt like there was no way for me to win this match because they were just so on top of healing, so efficient at killing threats when they popped out, that I felt like I couldn't get anything rolling. And that's what I'm concerned about, where it's like, if you have a team that knows the numbers, know what they're doing, always sticks together, right, and doesn't do stupid things where one person goes off and you can easily kill them, like, how can you beat them, right? And like I said, I'm sure there are much better demon players that I could learn from and study from, and that's important. But I also love when a game, when I can take a situation like that, analyze it, and being like, that's where I messed up. Or that was the thing where if I did that differently in the next match, I think I would do better. I didn't have a single thing in that demon match last night where I could point to and be like, well, that's clearly where he fucked up. And that's frustrating, right? And so, like, I can imagine, like, the survivors were having a great time because they were just strolling right through. But from a demon player, I don't even know what I could learn, right? It's like in a fighting game where you play against somebody and you're like, I don't even know when I could hit a button, right? It's like that kind of feeling.
That's how I feel every time I play a fighting game.
Right. Imagine that feeling in a different.
I'm like, I thought I was
game.
blocking.
But I think, and Blood, I don't know if you can back me up on this, at least from the survivor perspective, like, I wasn't getting bored of the matches that we were doing. Right. Like, not only I think was the match themselves fun, but having that translate to experience and then leveling up and that permanent progression, I was like, okay, like, this isn't a game I'm going to play one time and then put down. Like, I felt the incentive to keep picking away.
And I think, obviously, we were still just the first few hours in, but I feel like the map is big enough that, you know, it doesn't feel like you just immediately memorize it, right?
Right.
So it's like you get sent to random zones for where these pages and things might be.
Yep.
And you have no idea what's over there. So you're saying, like, you could try to hop in a car and then cut across terrain and then find out, like, oh, there's a hill there. That's not gonna work.
Yes.
know?
We had some.
And then sometimes, like,
driving.
you know, you just get a luck of the draw, and
Right.
like both of the items just pop up kind of right next to
Yes.
you, and it makes your life a lot easier. But other times they're like, okay, well, we're gonna have to go all the way over there, and then we're gonna have to go all the way back over there.
Right. And even like the areas where you find the pages, some of them feel like really, really big, and it's like, oh, okay, it's like on the edge. I have to go all the way over, and it takes you a while. And then other times, the map piece just feels you just stumble upon it immediately, right? So, yeah. Good stuff. It is time for the sizzle, and I know it's not quite E3 time yet, but I couldn't resist. If you had to say right now, right, put on your prediction hats, what will be the most exciting game shown off at E3? Either revealed already, what we know about, or unrevealed.
Oh boy. I mean, obviously, we'll just say Silent Hill and Bloodborne, whatever. Moving past that, I mean, they're probably going to show some good Ragnarok stuff, and I think that'll be pretty cool. Seeing anything more of Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel would be really amazing.
Yeah. I think Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be like mind-blowing whenever that gets shown off. Yeah.
My favorite stuff at E3 are those moments, where it's like, I didn't see this coming. This looks
dream come true
amazing.
moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously, so that's what I'm always looking forward to.
Yeah.
Right now, I think for me, the nexus point of something that feels both like it's going to happen and it'll never happen is Dragon's Dogma 2. Would be really exciting.
I'm willing to put money. I shouldn't say that on a podcast. I highly believe that Dragon's Dogma 2 will be shown off.
Yeah. We said the same thing about Silent Hill last year.
Well, so that's actually the thing is like I've wanted a new Silent Hill I've wanted anything Silent Hill for so long, and I've been waiting what feels like years, and I've gone on all these streams where I'm like, I want to see Silent Hill, I want to see Silent Hill, I want to see Silent Hill. And now I'm like bummed out that I know so much about it. You know what I mean? Like I wish I could have that fresh moment when it finally gets shown off.
Well, and also
not
like,
expecting it.
but it's weird though, because all these leaks for Silent Hill, like the Silent Hill 2 remake, the Bloober Team thing, all this other stuff, like they feel both credible and completely unbelievable to me in weird ways, where it's like, I won't be surprised now either way. Like I'm so used to disappointment with Silent Hill that if it doesn't happen at all, I'll be like, yeah. And if we see like 6 Silent Hills, I'll be like, yeah, cool, awesome, Reading
what the Bloober Team guy said, like the way that he gave a non-answer, I was like, this is 100%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When he was like, we can't comment on our third-party dealings, it's like, well, okay.
You'll learn more soon. Officially, it's like, okay, this is 100% real. Yeah.
But are they doing the new one? Are they doing the Silent Hill 2 one? What would I prefer out of them? Like, I don't know.
We'll get into it later.
But that's the other thing too, is it's like, will it really like having the Silent Hill brand raise it above their past works in any way, or will
it make it worse? Like,
it basically be just like another downpour or something?
Yeah, God.
We're infringing on the HOTTAKE.
Okay. Bloodworth, stop it.
No, it's not. It's not your fault.
But yeah, it's in terms of like other stuff that could be. It's really difficult because. I always do feel like it's the unexpected thing,
For sure,
like Wolverine.
That's what makes this fun.
Popped up.
Wolverine is a great answer, Blood.
Yeah, it's like if we see that game, I don't think we will. I think we'll probably another year, but it's.
Oh yeah.
It's when that popped up, it was just like I didn't see that coming at all.
Right.
So
some of the best stuff at E3 or Summer Games Fest, whatever. For me, have always been, because you're gonna get excited about Final Fantasy, whatever. You're going to get excited about God of War.
Probably going to be there.
2. Your Zelda, whatever. The stuff that really gets me going are, especially if they're shadow drop, but like the kind of medium fries stuff where it's like, oh, I don't know anything about this, but it looks cool and it's out right now and it's $20. Like that's the kind of stuff that really I love during that time period, because it just feels so exciting, and it feels like maybe not the meat of the sandwich, but like the really good dill pickles, that just like complete the whole picture.
You know what you are making me think of 2AT with that description. And I was thinking about this earlier today. Exoprimal.
Oh, right.
Just the roller coaster of emotions that was. I'm not saying it was great. I'm saying it was a roller coaster, right? Where like, it's like, is this Dino Crisis?
Right.
This definitely seems like Dino Crisis. Okay, this isn't Dino Crisis. Why isn't this Dino Crisis? What the hell is going on?
Is this Earth Defense Force? Like, what am I looking at? Yeah. Oh
Just
my God.
Just like the most, in so many ways, out of left field thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like there are two flavors of what I'm talking about. There's stuff like that where you're just like, what?
Yeah.
And then there's like Metal Slug Tactics where you're just like, yes.
Yes.
And like, obviously they're really hype when they just come out.
Right.
But because that's the scale of stuff that I think is perfect for Shadow Drops, where it's just like, yeah, here it goes, go for it.
Metal Slug
today.
Tactics is a perfect Shadow Drop, for sure. Not a creative answer, but I think just with Yoshi P being behind it and the fact that they have been so close to the chest with Final Fantasy 16, I think the cards are on the table for when the next time they show it, it's going to be like, holy shit. So I think that's a front runner for me. This sizzle is brought to you by some wonderful shout out to your patrons. For this one, I thought, like I said, Vampire Heavy episode, give me your best vampire. Isla, you know the clans far better than I do, so maybe pick your favorite clan.
Well, that's the thing. This is harder than you think. Because,
sure.
like, the best vampire has been chatting you up all night, takes you home, sleeps with you, and you wake up feeling good,
right?
And you don't know what happens, and then you never see her again.
What's funny is the way that you said that didn't happen in like a tabletop game or a video game. The way that you said that, it was like based on my real life personal experience.
Yeah. The vampire that did that to me,
right?
She was great. Yeah. So her.
But this is brought to you by Elthanas, Greg the Dark Knight Kettering, Caleb Togi Crawford, Nick, Anacrothe, and Jabbawabs. Shout out.
I never know on which show what we do for this. Like, do we say shout out now?
We say shout out.
Okay, shout out.
Blood, tell me about Root Liver.
That actually, it was funny because a bunch of people were talking about Liverpool this weekend because of the football matches, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And then like just my brain just like fixated on Liverpool. I'm like, why do they name a place Liverpool? And so I look it up, and it's like, oh yeah, of course, liver meant something entirely different thing in Old English. It didn't have anything to do with. It's just muddy water.
Oh,
but a Liverpool thinking of liver, horrifying.
right. Like if you think about the organ, it's like no, it's
like,
not what that means at all.
I also played like an hour of Loot River too.
Yeah, so I played a couple of hours.
Root Liver,
and it's weird because it's like I'm fascinated by the concept of it.
Yeah.
But it's just not grabbing me in a moment-to-moment way.
Yeah. Before we get there, though, give me the top-down.
Yeah, the top-down.
It's top-down.
It is top-down. Dungeon crawler, roguelike plus Souls-like, basically.
Plus Tetris.
More like the slide puzzle games. And so basically, yeah. So when you're going through a dungeon, it's all like these like floating platforms. Which some of them I don't know how they float because they're like made of stone, but whatever. There's like these floating platforms that you can use the right stick to move around. And those, some of them are kind of Tetris shaped or like plus signs or whatever. And then different areas have different materials and different styles of things. And so like so there's like an intro area, and then you go up against the boss, and then you die, and then you get resurrected in this place that's just called Sanctuary. And that's sort of like your main hub, like your Hades hub.
Right. You like find NPCs and they'll show up there.
Yeah, so when you meet other NPCs, then they'll come back there and then they might sell you hats or whatever.
Why is it always hats?
I don't know.
Easy to program, I guess.
Visual plus stats, I guess. I don't know. But then the combat is very, very soulsy. It's like you use the triggers, and you've got like the light attack and a heavy attack, and you've got like a dodge and a parry, and you've got the potions, which use the D-pad to use a potion. But what's interesting with the potions is when you go out, there's like a vendor there, like right before you start the level, who is like,
right.
if you want to invest in potions, I'll double them for you when you get back. And so that's interesting because like if you get the first zone when you go out is a quicker one. There's even a bonus that you'll get if you like get to the exit in like under 2 minutes. But then when you get back, that vendor like, okay, well now you've, and
so you have to live. If you die, it won't work.
Right.
Okay.
If you die, then like most of your stuff resets. I think you keep like half of what's called knowledge, which you use to unlock weapons.
Yeah.
But coins go away. Coins are only good like during your run.
Yeah.
And then your weapons reset and your gold goes. Yeah, that's what I just said. Anyways, other stuff resets. But yeah, so when you when you're exploring, you like I said, you're using the right stick and you're like moving these platforms around to get through an area. And so sometimes like a platform will be too big, so you've got to kind of like shift them around like one of those little slide square puzzle games. Like move this one over here, move that over there, and then get on the little one, and then I can go through, that tunnel there. And then other times there'll be like
that I want to
staircases. Yeah, so like some enemies will be up on a higher ground, so you
they
can't.
move quickly,
Okay.
which is nice.
They do move
Like,
fairly quickly.
I was worried that it would be like, no, they're like, whoosh.
Okay.
And like the enemies will be on one, and you kind of see, since it's top down, you can see the whole room, and it's like, okay, there's a big enemy over there and a whole horde of enemies on this one. I can like move the piece up, ping him, move the piece back when he attacks,
Yeah,
move
you
the
can
piece up,
isolate
ping
enemies
him,
that way,
move this
yeah.
piece back, and like it's cool. And then sometimes they'll jump onto your piece, and then you're like, well, gotta fight them all out now, So it does add an element to both exploration and combat that seemed pretty interesting.
Yeah, and there's some other little tricks. There's some enemies that will basically like lock the platforms in place, so you can't move the platform unless you kill that enemy. And there's like fire traps. So it'll like light the platform on fire and then any adjoining platforms. So all right, I gotta just get off of this thing as quickly as I can.
Which you get an achievement for if you burn a bunch of them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because I don't know what your experience was, and I only played it for like I said, like an hour. I saw a thing a day or two after I had played some of it. That was the developers on Steam responding to, I guess, kind of the majority opinion that the game starts off too slowly. There's no good loot. It's too kind of obtuse, and it's not fun at first. And then everyone that got through that was saying the game gets awesome like 5 or 6 hours in when things actually start happening and like everything comes together. But for a game called Loot River to not have any good loot or any interesting loot at all for the first like bunch of the game seems a little weird. And the devs were like, it's a classic, like, we messed up, like, we're gonna do better, like, thank you for telling us, so it seems like they're in the right place.
Making adjustments.
Because
I actually fairly early on got like a poison based sword.
Oh yeah.
And like, oh, this is sweet,
Because I did like 3 runs getting like to the boss or whatever, and hadn't really found much of anything. And I think I was playing it pre-release. I don't remember exactly when I got it, but
okay.
So that's good to hear that they're like tweaking it all the time.
Yeah,
like the attitude they had, I was like, okay, these guys are coming from the right place with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your skill points is the other thing that resets too. So like you're getting skill points per run. But the one thing that sort of carries over is, like I was saying, there's a weapons merchant there. And you use the currency called knowledge that you get from killing enemies to unlock weapons. And so when you first unlock it, like you'll be able to pick up that weapon there. But then it basically expands the pool of things that you're going to find in chests and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, as they're saying, it's like when you first start out, it's like, okay, you only have like 2 or 3 weapon types that unlock. But the further you get, then more and more variety happens.
That was something I liked, though, that you can equip 2 weapons at the same time and switch between them.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, you don't really have an inventory. It's just like what's equipped and then like 1 extra weapon. So I think you have like 3 ring slots. And so once you've gotten 3 rings, and like any other rings you come across, and like, okay, now I have to decide, do I want, this ring that gives me like an extra 2 endurance? Or do you want another one that like, enhances your healing or whatever?
Was this the game that had like, you open the equipment screen, it was just like huge wall of like stuff you're looking at, and it was just like
no, it's
text
pretty
and stuff?
simple.
Oh,
It's just like, yeah.
I was confusing it with a different game then. Oh, no,
like-
I was thinking of Dolmen, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I played them around the same time, so I was like, oh boy.
Dolmen River.
And then one of the other things I was coming across are artifacts, and so those basically are like run modifiers. So you go to one of the NPCs and you like put whatever artifacts in the slot, and so you might like have a run where there's more enemies. You have a run where the enemies don't have extending spears, but they have more armor and that kind of thing.
And I assume you get better loot if you have negative modifiers going into it.
Yeah, it depends. It's like different modifiers will have different pluses and minuses.
Gotcha.
But the thing I think that kind of like makes it tough for me to get into is that I'm just not feeling like the basic combat that well.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
And part of it is definitely, like some weapons will click with you better than others.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like with the sort of like Souls-like approach where, you're supposed to, read an enemy and respond and attack in the right timing, the top down, it just feels like visually cluttered sometimes.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so I don't necessarily know that I'm actually able to read their attacks when I've got a swarm of guys that are all sort of on top of each other.
Yeah.
And you feel like you have less command of the directions. Because like diagonals are tough on isometric top-down stuff.
And there will be like this little kind of like sort of like blink above their heads to like indicate there's a move that they're going to do that you could parry. But then the timing is still a little weird, and then like I said, like visually, like sometimes you won't see the blink, and so it's a little tricky to kind of like work in those mechanics unless like an enemy is just isolated.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just like, well, just take something that you can just slash through everybody as quickly as you can, and then like charge attacks too. It's like I feel like the charge takes too long to be that useful. Like, I don't know how often I'm going to get a charge attack off on somebody. And when you're charging, you can't move. So you're just, like, stuck in place. Yeah.
Can you move a block while you're charging? I can't remember.
I think you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what they think you're going to do.
Yeah, charge and then come
Move
back,
the block
maybe.
away?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is there? So you mentioned, going to returning to a town after a run and having NPCs, and one of the best things about Hades is how awesome that world was and how awesome the characters were, right? On top of the excellent gameplay. Is there like a strong narrative hook to Loot River? Are there interesting characters to interact with, or?
There's a little bit there. I don't know that I've seen enough to say that like it's a big hook to the game, but you definitely get guys that are pretty much they're kind of downers, and they're like, yeah, you're not gonna make it here or whatever, and then other people are like, oh, I'm glad you found that guy and brought him back, and there's like a bard who doesn't play very well, which I found kind of endearing. Like just to hear him just like over there fiddling with his instrument, and it's like, yeah, this doesn't sound good, dude, but keep going.
It'd be funny if like the further you get, the better he plays.
Right.
His journey kind of mirrors.
No,
that.
that'd be
I like
cute.
that.
So like I said, I feel like I'm interested in the concept, and like obviously like kind of that roguelike nature of like wanting to go back for another run and like try to get further, because that's the thing that's like I still need to get past sort of like the second area, but I like this idea of like, okay, if you survive, then you come back to town and then you can like spend and you can invest a lot more in, but sometimes you just don't get that lucky, because the maps are sort of randomized. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what it's like past that breaking point that you were kind of talking about, Isla, because I think about Returnal, where it's like, yes, I liked Returnal immediately, but like there was definitely a point, right, where I was like, oh, okay, I love this game, right? And it took a while to get there, for sure. Isla.
Yeah.
Huber says Rogue Legacy 2 is GOATY. Do you agree?
It's in the conversation.
Yeah.
For sure. Like,
Yeah.
it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. Like, one was really, really good, and this one takes everything that was good about one, expands on it, tightens it, refines it, and just comes up with a bunch of new ideas also. It's an incredible game, and I'm like not very good at it. I beat the first. It's hard. I just beat the first boss, I don't know, a couple of days ago, and I'm starting to build enough confidence to kind of like dip my toes in the other zones. And I'm just loving every second of it because it feels so good to play. Like, it's so tight. It does exactly what you want to do. I'm in awe at how different each class feels without feeling like a different game every class. You know what I mean? Like, and it just
Monster Hunter
fits. Yes, it's like Monster Hunter. Honestly, it really is. And it's like, okay, the Valkyrie can attack in different directions. And like, you get used to that, and then you're playing a different character. You're like, oh, right, I can't do that. But it never feels limiting or like you've lost something. It's just like the give and take of every character is so good. The cook is my favorite.
Nice.
That's so fascinating because I feel like that is incredibly difficult to
Oh, my God.
cultivate in a player where the player is losing, but they want to keep playing. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's the opposite of usually how I feel like game design works.
And honestly, that, like, I don't have that drive with most roguelikes. Like, I scrub out on most of them. And I'm sure maybe I'll scrub out on this one too, but like, I've been playing this one way more than Rogue Legacy 1. I actually feel like I have a shot more than Rogue Legacy 1.
Why is that?
Just because I feel like the progression that they're giving me is consistent enough, and you feel the impact of it enough. And I imagine that someone like Huber, who is probably better at this game than I am, got to where I am much faster, but by me just continuing to try and continuing to upgrade my stuff, every run I'm making more money. Every run I'm finding new things, getting a little farther, and it just feels really well balanced and really rewarding still.
So you never have a run that feels wasted.
Right, exactly. And like, there'll be runs where like I have a certain kind of character, and then I'm like, okay, for this run, I'm going to do this. I'm going to just focus on getting money. I'm just going to focus on trying to beat the boss. I'm going to focus on just exploration forward because this character is good at jumping or whatever. And that feels really, really rewarding, and it incentivizes different play styles, which is the whole point of having different characters that you're forced to play.
Yeah.
And it's just so well done. And I love that. I love this game for that because it really does feel rewarding, even if you're not the best at it. And if you're really not having a good time, I noticed something the other day, and I haven't messed with them yet, but I think probably eventually I will if I hit a brick wall, or like start running out of time to keep going on it. They have a thing called house rules in there, and it's really cool. So it says house rules, and it's very clear. It's like, you won't miss out on any trophies. You won't, this won't impact, your experience. We want everyone to be able to play this game how they want and see the story and get there. And the house rules are really, really fascinating. I looked through them, and you can change them so the game gets harder or easier. You can set up more invulnerability. You can change HP pools.
More invulnerability is fascinating.
It's really interesting stuff.
Like,
and
how granular is that?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I haven't
see.
There's a toggle that says house rules on off, and then you can change a whole
see.
bunch of stuff.
I see.
And I just kind of glanced at it just to see like, house rules, what's that? But just the fact that it's there is really interesting, and it kind of gets into that difficulty debate that people were having. And it's like, for me personally, it doesn't bother me that they're there, and I don't want to use them until I feel like I'm gonna get sick of the game and stop, and then maybe I'll just put it on God mode. I don't know if it has like God mode, but like maybe I'll make it a little easier for myself like later if I would otherwise stop playing.
But what I think is so interesting and really telling about the way that you're describing this is I think it's super cool that they're like, hey, here's this option, change what you want, make the game how you want it to be. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
But I also think it's awesome that you feel like the game is good enough
Right.
that I'm motivated by myself, even if I'm struggling, to keep playing on the default way. To me, that is the mark of an incredible game where it's like
Exactly.
like I don't have to turn on these things to have a good time.
Yes, and like that is I am in awe of this game because it feels so perfectly tuned and balanced, and like the gameplay is so, it's like what I was talking about with From Software, right? Where it's like this game, you feel the hands of masters in its creation. Like it's like a FromSoft game where you're just like, this just feels right.
Yeah.
Like, and there are other games, even by like big studios, where you're like, I'm really loving this, but like the dodge roll's a little weird, or like the impacts feel a little weird. This one is just, everything about it is so perfectly tuned, at least for me.
Yeah.
I really love the way it feels, and it earns the respect of having a house rules mode like that, where they can say, hey, we just want everybody to have a good time. The game is set how we think, we recommend playing it, but if you want to tune it, go for it. We don't care. Like, and I love that.
It kind of ties into what Blood was saying about Loot River, where Blood was like, I really like the concept of this, but the nuts and bolts leave something to be desired, where I feel like this game is both nuts and bolts fantastic and conceptually fantastic.
Yeah.
Right? And kind of stands apart.
Yeah, and that's one of the hard things I was having with Loot River is like, why would I be playing this right now when I could either be playing Rogue Legacy 2 or Elden Ring?
Right. That's literally
like when it's like combining those two ideas but not doing either as well.
That's literally what I was just going to say. It's like, I feel like every game right now is getting short shrift because of Elden Ring and Rogue Legacy 2 and these other experiences, because it's like playing Elden Ring, platinuming that, and then playing Dolmen is hilarious. And then playing Loot River and stopping that to play Rogue Legacy 2 is amazing, because it's hilarious also because Loot River conceptually, I really like the idea of it. Like the pieces, the moving around, the traversal, like that is interesting, but the gameplay, like you said, just wasn't there. And Rogue Legacy, like Elden Ring, I just think about jumping around and hitting stuff in that. Like I'll see a video of Elden Ring, right, on YouTube, and it's like, I've done that game. I'm done with that game. And like I just still have like sense memory of what it feels like to use my katanas in that game, right? Like it feels like I did it with, like I can feel them in my hands, right? And I just love feeling it. And that's when you know you've got an amazing game. And game feel is ineffable. It's hard. Yeah. Like if everybody could do it, everybody would do it, right? It's like really, really hard. And like there are dissertations about Mario's jump. Yeah. And like they spent hours, years on perfecting that, right? And it's just like,
well, if you look at the stuff like from the nuts and bolts of Celeste, and like where they fudge things in the player's favor, but it's like it feels perfect.
It feels right.
But,
yeah. And like that's the kind of stuff that like there's probably stuff going on under the hood. And like even in Rogue Legacy 2, sometimes I'll notice it where it's like, that should have damaged me, but it didn't. Like I came in a room and there was like a spike ball going by and I hit it. But because I had just come into the room, I couldn't have seen it. And it wouldn't have been fair if that hit me and it didn't hit me. And it's like, okay, so they've built in an invisible invulnerability for the first few frames of coming into a room.
That's so smart.
Because of like the human brain's reaction time. And it's like, if you drop for long enough that you could have seen it, and it'll still damage you. And it's like, that kind of stuff is game feel. And like the impacts are game feel. And it's like, so many tiny things that just go into making a game feel perfect and feel respectful and fair. That's so important, and especially for a game like Rogue Legacy 2. Yeah,
it's extremely telling when just the way a game comes up on Frame Trap, I think, indicates a lot, because there are just so many games. A lot of times we only have time to highlight something once, but the fact that Huber got on here last episode and was effervescent about Rogue Legacy 2, and you're matching his energy, beat for beat, it's just like, okay, like this is clearly something amazing.
Yeah. It for me especially, like I'll drop something, I'll just stop playing it, and like even if I do eventually stop playing Rogue Legacy 2, it's just so clearly a masterwork. Like it's so well made.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm jazzed, man.
Yeah,
I can't wait to have that go to
fantastic, dude.
the last game that we're going to talk about is one where I have to. I'm actually going to rely on Isla, especially. Blood, I'm not sure if you played Valheim.
No.
Okay, so I'll have to rely on Isla here. Where I think my positivity on this game is coming from the fact that I didn't play Valheim.
Okay.
And that is V Rising.
Oh, okay.
Whoa.
Yeah.
The heck is this?
Yeah, V Rising.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so it's been getting kind of a buzz recently, and like I said, I've just been in this vampire mood. But the V stands for vampire, and the way that it works is you kind of make your character, you wake up in this coffin, you go out into the wilderness, you build a base, you hunt down things to take their abilities and to learn new things. And so it is very much a light action RPG. You have like a counter and a dodge and a ranged attack and all this stuff. But it's not, it's not as like involved as like a character action game. On top of, okay, like I have to go farm for these resources to build these structures, which will help me build more things. So it's all of this stuff. And normally I kind of bounce off of crafting games. I don't know why. It's just something that I don't know if I just get bored or if it's too overwhelming or if it's too freeform for me. I can't quite put my finger on it, but like you guys, both of you were like, let's do more grounded streams. Like you guys were really into that game. And I was like, I never want to play the game.
Yeah.
I just wasn't feeling it. I am really feeling V Rising. And I think it's because of a couple of things. I think it's the way that it does its structure, where it's sort of taking you through the core mechanics of the game, like craft this, build this, do this, in a way where like I feel like I have that kind of like dopamine hit of like I did the objective and you gave me a thing, while also getting out there and exploring and gathering and finding things and kind of having that natural discovery that I think is kind of the hallmark of these games, which is so, so good. The other thing that I like, and is always a big complaint for me, is I remember playing Fallout 4 and being like, I want to build cool stuff, but I feel like I am constantly fighting this construction system, or things just like aren't working in a way that makes sense to me.
You have to do like some weird thing to connect the electricity or whatever.
Yeah. It's just like, it just felt like a headache. And I'm sure like you could learn it and get over it and all this stuff. But in V Rising, it's just like, okay, I build it, it works, it clicks, I'm not struggling with it. I'm just doing what I want to do. And because I'm just doing what I want to do, I completely skip the frustrating learn phase and I graduate to the I have a cool base phase that I'm proud of, right? And so that is so, so awesome. But I think what really, like, it's the vampire stuff that makes it special, right? Like all of the things that I'm talking about, I think you can attribute to so many other games. The fact that like there is a day-night cycle that is constantly going, and if you walk around in the day, the sun will burn you and your health will melt. So you have to navigate using the shadows, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to move from this patch of trees to this patch of trees. And then you have that wonderful, like, the game doesn't tell you, but you figure it out in kind of a fun, natural way where you're like, oh, okay, it's the middle of the day. I'm in the shadows. I'm going to farm this tree. And then you knock down the tree and you're like, wait a minute, there goes my shadow and I'm burning alive, right? And so, like, that's just kind of a fun, special moment. And, but my absolute favorite thing is you'll build like this, I don't remember what it's called. I think it's like a blood altar. And it will be like, okay, here's these like bosses that you can go and you can hunt. And if you do that, you'll get different abilities. So I killed this
Valheim.
I killed this alpha wolf, and then suddenly now I can transform into a wolf. And when I'm in wolf form, I move 45% faster.
Oh, okay. Nice.
That's just awesome. Then I was like, wait a minute, to upgrade like this core thing in my base, I need leather. How do I get leather? I Googled it, and they're like, you have to kill this ranger. So this was so cool because it felt like a crafted single-player RPG. Like it had that element to it amidst this like sort of free-form exploration game, because I found their base, right? I found out where this archer was that I needed to kill to get the leather. It's daytime, so I'm like, I'm going to wait until night. So I'm like hiding in the shadows. It's finally night. You don't just see the person that you need to kill. Like, they're in this whole base. And so I'm, like, killing their henchmen and the archers, and then I run into, like, this brute. The brute has a counter. I hadn't experienced that before. There were these assassins that could disappear and then did this huge stab that could incapacitate me. So I'm learning all these new mechanics, and that's really, really cool. Then I finally find the person that I need to kill to get the leather. They have... like they're like a named character and they have like voice dialogue. So it gives them this like whole new element of mystique, which is really, really cool. But then as I'm fighting her, right, because everything has a level, and I think your level is based on like the quality of gear that you're using, but I'm not quite sure on that. I could be wrong. So like I could see that the person that I was supposed to kill had the same level as me. Out of nowhere, I don't know what prompted it. I don't know if it's just a random thing that can happen. There was this guy, Vampire Hunter, level skull. And he was like, you're the one I've been searching for.
Oh, no.
And like just completely murdered me, you know, so I had to. But then the next time I went and I fought the archer that I needed to kill, the Vampire Hunter wasn't there. And so it's like, what are the rules for this thing? And so it was kind of exciting and cool. I do have to say, when I first started V Rising...
I'm so sorry, I have to go to...
No, it's okay. I do too. I get it. I did, so there's a PvP server you can do, or you can do PvE. I did PvP. I don't recommend that if you're just learning the game. I ran into 2 people, and they just completely obliterated me. So I think if you're playing by yourself and you're not with a group of friends or at least one other person, I think PvE is probably the better way to go. Even though the idea of like storming other players' bases and all that stuff sounds awesome. But yeah, I feel like my positivity, like I'm getting what people got when they first played Valheim, but because it's like this cool vampire stuff, it's really resonating with me. And it's one of those games that when I play it, like it's very easy to want to keep playing because you're always like close to the next thing.
Whenever there's like a bit of progress and like I'm working on this thing or I'm working on that, and you just kind of get lost because there's not really any like chapter end break.
Right.
Yeah, which is it's like the opposite way, you know, what I feel with, you know, when we were talking about Swansong, it's like, okay, I got to the end of that chapter, that was really intense. I'm gonna put this down, play something else, come back and do another chapter tomorrow night. Yeah.
It actually kind of has a quality of Rune Factory that I really, really like, where like the combat in Rune Factory like isn't enough to be its own game, but because it's kind of wedged into this farming life simulator, like it's a nice balance. So like you'll have days in Rune Factory where it's like, oh man, I made a ton of money from crops, or like I finally harvested this new thing. And then you'll have days where you're like, oh, okay, I cleared out that dungeon. Like V Rising is kind of the same thing, where it's like, man, I defeated that archer. That was really cool. That was like all combat. Versus I finally built this new thing for my base. It's finally ready, or I finally have the mats to make this thing go. And I think those two things working together is a really, really potent combination.
Nice.
Yeah, Blood, I would actually, because I like how into grounded you got, right? Where I would love to, because like now I kind of understand this game and I'm hitting the ground running. I would love to partner with like you or Isla or Huber or anybody and like try to do PvP, right? Try to be like, are we strong enough to take on another vampire thing? But yeah, this game has been getting a lot of attention. I know it's been streamed a lot on Twitch. That's actually how I found out about it, and I'm glad that curiosity.
You just kind of play it free form, because I remember with like Valheim, like people were like setting up their own servers and stuff, and I don't know how
you can do that here.
Okay.
So there's like you can set up your own server. I didn't do that. You can select, do you want PvE, do you want PvP, and then you can have a server list, right? And so I'm assuming people can do whatever they want on their servers. But yeah, in terms of the gameplay, it's very freeform, where like once you get past the tutorial area, you go into the woodlands and it's like, yeah, you can make your base anywhere, right? And so you run into that situation where you're like, I finally found an opening. Oh, somebody already built their base there. Well, I guess I have to go further. Yeah. And so it's really, really cool. I think you would like this game a lot.
It sounds interesting. Yeah. It's funny because, yeah, I played a lot of Valheim. In the past, I played a lot of Minecraft, you know. grounded. It's funny, these games, more so than any other genre, I like go hard in
and hard
and
out.
then I just never want to see it again.
Yeah. It's funny because it's like a very different type of game, but that's how I feel about Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Where like once every other year, I will get the bug and it will bite me super hard.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do not care for, for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
it's like I'm still paying for a Valheim server, I think, but like just the other day I was like, I should download our world and then kind of stop paying for this. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's like $30 a month or some crazy thing. Yeah.
I wonder if I had played Valheim, if I would feel even remotely as positive. You know what I mean? Like just missing that train.
Yeah.
I think
It was a very good
was
COVID
interesting.
game, Valheim. Hit right
I can
place, right
imagine.
time, kind of.
Yeah, V Rising would be a very good COVID game. Like this is a game where it's like if I had a week off.
Let's hope we don't get
No,
the
no, no.
chance.
Yeah,
that,
not wishing for COVID. I'm just saying, like, if I had a week where I had no responsibilities, I could totally see myself just playing this. But it is time for the HOTTAKE. Woo! And Isla, I imagine this HOTTAKE will be very relevant to you. Blood, what is your experience / interest in Silent Hill?
It's bizarre.
Okay.
Because my experience is low, but my interest is high.
Okay.
Like I've been around
That's
a lot
good.
of Silent Hill to where like I feel like I know it, but realistically, like I don't know that I've actually played through any Silent Hill game.
Okay.
I've just
None
been
of them.
around it. Like I had a friend that showed me like maybe the first half of Silent Hill 2, not long after it came out, but like never actually like taken a game, played through it myself. Just like I don't know. It's just maybe it's because I've like been around other people that have been playing it.
Yeah, no, I
that
get
it just
that.
never happened. It's weird.
It's funny because I was the friend. My friend Evan would come over and watch me play Silent Hill 1, and then which was perfect for me because like if someone's watching me play a horror game, I like don't get scared really.
And then the other weird thing is that then I've like played Silent Hill likes, and really
Sure.
enjoyed them. But
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
because you
Silent Hill
reviewed
2
the
came
medium,
out,
didn't
he
you?
did the same thing.
I didn't review the medium,
Oh,
but I
but you
played
played
through
the
it.
medium.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Silent Hill.
Yeah, well, I actually just did a playthrough with my wife. We played through Silent Hill 2. We played the HD edition.
HD
together.
edition or enhanced edition?
Not enhanced. So
Ooh.
we played
The HD
we played
remake?
yes, we played the patched PS3 version of Silent Hill 2 HD. Yes,
The
since-
PS3 version
after
with
we got
patch
done with that,
is okay.
I downloaded the enhanced edition. I was
Okay.
like, oh, we should have played this. But
You definitely should have played
yes, yes.
that.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand. But I don't want to get into spoilers, of course. But the rumor is that Bloober Team, responsible for the medium, is remaking Silent Hill 2. And so the
That's
question
the
of this
rumor.
HOTTAKE is, I don't know if you physically can remake Silent Hill 2 in a way that works out. And so that's kind of the crux of this situation. And it's a very complex issue because when I say that, I am not trying to insult Bloober Team
Right.
or to say that games cannot be remade, but Silent Hill 2 is such a fascinating thing where it has all of these pieces, and if any of those pieces is out of place,
Right.
it's suddenly not the same thing, right? And also, of course, Silent Hill 2 is a very old game, and so I'm sure a bunch of people will be coming to it for the first time, but a lot of people aren't. And I feel like a big joy of Silent Hill 2 is witnessing the story that it is trying to tell.
Yeah.
Because you really don't get it until the end. It is a very holistic story. And so once you know that, seeing it again, I don't know if the power is there anymore. And so it's like my question to you is like, should this even happen? Is it even possible?
It's interesting because I've played through Silent Hill 2 sometimes in one sitting, certainly like 5 times or more in my life.
In one sitting. That's amazing.
I mean, we streamed it and like we streamed the whole thing. And it's like 8 hours, whatever. If you know what you're doing, maybe 6 if you're not a speed runner, obviously they can get it in like whatever an hour. But like a couple of things come to mind, right? Like Blue Point and Demon Souls.
Yep.
And Capcom and the Resident Evil remakes. And it's like, okay, we're in a situation where it's like, okay, Silent Hill 2, obviously, gameplay-wise, much more similar to the OG Resident Evils than to Demon Souls. Blue Point remade Demon Souls, to use a movie term, like shot for shot. It's like basically just mechanically modernized, but otherwise pretty much the same, just looks better, feels better, and plays more modern, but feels like your memory of that game, right? So it's like the same, quote unquote. Whereas Capcom fully remade and changed Resident Evil. They're not fixed camera. They're very different. The spirit is the same, but they're completely different in a weird way, right? They're the same, but completely different. And
but they're kind of built on the same principles of survival horror in the sense that where it's like you really need to pay attention to your ammunition, how you take down an enemy, when you use the knife, like all that stuff, like the bones are there. Whereas like Silent Hill 2, if you do a couple of things, it's like I have infinite ammo. Like you can find so much ammo, right?
Well, I mean, the board with the nail in it is like god tier from the whole game. But like, the thing I was kind of gonna say is like, there's a third party remaking Demon Souls, Blue Point, right? They're a trusted name. They've done this, but they always do that kind of one-to-one but modernized remasters, right? Capcom is a first party doing their own game and changing it a bunch. And it's like, okay, but they're the ones who did it. They're the hands at the till, so they can
different
literal people, but the same company. So it's it feels like they have the authorship and the authority to make those changes, right? With Silent Hill 2 at the hands of Bloober Team, especially with the way Konami is in our reality now, where it's like, I don't know that I would trust Konami either, but like Bloober Team, it's like, okay.
Konami literally doesn't understand the point of Pyramid Head.
Right. Oh, yeah. Not at all. And like they historically have let...
very specific thing.
Right. They have historically let Western developers and whoever just do whatever they want. And like, so we get sexy nurses and Pyramid Head and everything. And it's like, no, guys,
this
those
doesn't
were there.
make any sense.
Those were there for a reason.
Yeah.
Whatever. But like, so it's like with Bloober Team, if they are doing a Silent Hill, I think this is part of the tension that everyone's feeling because everyone's kind of worried about it because like their previous games are not bad. 7s, 8s, whatever. Like they're not bad games. Observer was interesting. Medium was interesting, but they're not Silent Hill 2.
Right.
And Silent Hill 2 is a dated game. Like you said, it's a fixed camera game. It's the controls are what they are. And you can modernize those like an enhanced edition and it works great, but they kept it fixed camera. And it's like, does Bloober Team have the authority, some might say the audacity, to do a Capcom Resident Evil RE engine style thing? And is that what is necessary for a modern audience to enjoy it? Or is Bloober Team going to do a Blue Point? And is that going to be good enough? Will modern audiences like that? Because the game feel of Silent Hill 2 is a lot more aged than the game feel of Demon's Souls. Like you put in an 8-way roll and you're there for Demon's Souls. It's like, fine, it feels modern.
I think it is hard to make this a convincing argument if somebody doesn't know the totality of the Silent Hill 2 story.
Yeah.
Because there's very few things I think I could make this argument for. But in the case of Silent Hill 2, making the gameplay better is of no interest to me. Mm-hmm. It's like kind of missing the point. You
might actually be a detriment, like not just saying that.
Yeah, it's the gameplay is in service of the story in such a fundamental way where you're not playing it because, oh my God, this is excellent survival horror mechanics, right? Like you play the you play the Resident Evil 2 remake, you can skip every cutscene and have a great time because it is that type of game where you're sweating the aiming, where you're worrying about ammo conservation, right? Where it really is survival horror. This is psychological horror where just the act of playing the game and watching it slowly get more surreal, right? It's the experience, it's the vibe, it is the metaphor of it that is interesting. The gameplay has a point, but it is not like, if you're like, I just made the controls tighter, it's not suddenly like a better game. It's more than that. And so...
And like with fixed camera, like I'm thinking of my favorite moments, like or scares in Silent Hill. Like the biggest jump scare in video game history, Silent Hill 4, is because of the fixed cameras.
Well, even Silent Hill 2, right? So it's super fresh in my mind.
Right. If like Pyramid Head at the end of the hallway, legendary.
Yes, exactly. So if you can just suddenly turn the camera like perfectly in all directions in Silent Hill 2, you don't have those moments where you enter a room and like things are ajar or disorienting. Like,
right.
All of that is very intentional and serves a super direct purpose.
And I've talked about this before, one of my least favorite things in a game that usually has camera control is when they take it away to do a cool thing.
Right.
And like to be like, oh, we need this angle for this cool thing. And it's like Silent Hill 2 will not be served well by that, I think. Like, you have to go one way or the other. Like, there are ways to do scares with full player control. Most horror games now do that, and it's amazing, and it's very effective. I honestly think if you're going to go camera control with Silent Hill 2, and I don't want this, but I almost think go first person. I don't want that, but like, I think that might actually be scarier and better than over the shoulder in a way if you're taking away fixed cameras. Again, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And maybe that's wrong, but like the fixed cameras for me are so important in Silent Hill 2. Like some of the craziest things are like going into the laundry room and the camera goes like tilts downward to the side and like feels like it falls off a tripod in the game. And then when you leave that room again, it like reassembles itself and follows you. It's just like, why does that happen? It's crazy and it's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing how scary Silent Hill 2 still is.
Yeah.
Because but the thing is, it shows so much fucking restraint. That is why it's scary. Most of the time, nothing is happening. But then you go into a room and you're hours into the game, and all of a sudden you just start hearing whispers. But it's not like every new location you go and you start hearing whispers. It is the very like, I am going to put this here craftsmanship of Silent Hill 2 that makes it remarkable. But another thing that I want to comment on is I think the reason I don't even like Silent Hill 2 because it's scary. That's not like the thing that I would say if I was trying to get somebody into Silent Hill 2. It's nice, but it has nothing to do with why I like that game so much. I like the game so much because of the maturity of its story and the fact that almost no other game talks about what it's talking about as well as it talks about it.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, that is kind of like the whole point of Silent Hill 2. And if it was just like Bloober Team is just making a new Silent Hill with a new story and new message, I'm way on board with that.
I think for their sake, I hope that's the case. But
then it's not Silent Hill 2.
Right. But that's what I'm saying is like, I hope for Bloober Team's sake, they're not remaking Silent Hill 2.
Yes.
Right.
Because like, they'll get flamed. Like, it's too sacred ground.
Yes.
And it's like, I wouldn't wish that upon anybody.
No.
And like, any little deviation or mistake will be met with such weird vibes.
Right.
That like, I don't even think it would be worth it for them. And like, making their own Silent Hill, the vibes, the expectations of a new Silent Hill game are so all over the place. Like, everyone wants it to be this perfect crystalline thing, but then you're like, the last two, certainly Silent Hill, mainline Silent Hill games, were not good / down to bad.
Yeah.
And it's like, Shattered Memories is like the latest like great one.
Well, but that's the thing, right? Is if you're in that position where it's like, well, at least it's better than the last four.
Right.
Like, that's a good spot to be in.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
So why go after the
like it's straight up Icarus. Like
yes.
And like
straight up
Bloober Team doing it has a much different expectation, and like I think an unkind expectation versus like if Bluepoint were doing it.
Right.
And it's like, because Bluepoint has that pedigree and that trust built up, I think that the vibes would be very different, but they would be doing a different kind of thing. Like, I think you could expect a 1-to-1 with Bluepoint, whereas Bloober, you know, a string of 8s is cool, but that's not remake Silent Hill 2 level.
Well, you talk about the Bluepoint comparison, but I find that to be so interesting because imagine if the last Souls game that came out was Demon Souls. So the announcement of like a 2020 remake of that would be, I think, met with so much more scrutiny, right? But Souls has had this incredible lineage.
Right, because it's been a huge gap for Silent Hill.
Right, it's been a massive gap, right?
Yeah.
And so, particularly since Team Silent has worked on Silent
you want to know the gap? I showed this to Isla.
Yeah.
Because when I was putting the thumbnail for the podcast together, because we talked about it on the podcast, it's like, all right, I'll go to Konami's press center and see what they got for Silent Hill.
Yeah.
They don't even have a spot for it. Like, you go through all of their products.
Just Yu-Gi-Oh! And PES.
Well, there's a lot of other things that you don't even heard of.
There's a lot of other obscure old things on there, and they don't even have Silent Hill on the list.
They don't have a Silent Hill category, even though they make a point of putting Silent Hill in the footer of every email they send out. It's hilarious.
It's crazy. Well, and it's because, like, I recently learned a metric that I did not know and put, I feel like, my entire life into context, that Resident Evil 7 sold more itself than the entire Silent Hill franchise ever. And like, I knew Silent Hill was second fiddle. I didn't realize it was to that extent. And like, I should say 7 is the best selling of, whatever. But like, and there's 1,000 versions, but
Village is doing super well.
Village is also doing super well. And it's just like, okay, I didn't realize that Silent Hill was that far behind, and it makes sense.
Well, even the launch of Silent Hill, because Silent Hill 1 was 99, right?
Yeah.
The whole narrative around Silent Hill, really before it could develop its whole identity, was it's like Resident Evil. This is Konami's Resident Evil, right? And so it has a legacy of being in that shadow.
But it's interesting, though, because to me, you're fully right. But also to me, growing up when these games were coming out, right? Like, Resident Evil, I loved it. Silent Hill, I loved it. And they're two sides of the same coin to me. Like they fill out, like they make the complete pie in my mind, where it's like Resident Evil is the fun, campy, like zany, spooky horror, and Silent Hill is the like existential, psychological.
You play Silent Hill 1, it's immediately obvious like how different it is.
And it's like, to me, it's like we society needs both. We need them both.
But you think about the decision, like Resident Evil we never go that long without a new Resident Evil game, right? Or at least in recent memory, okay? But also, like, they're constantly remaking the games, and those remakes are of generally very high quality. And it's like, think about the narrative around Silent. Imagine like wanting to get into Silent Hill and being like, okay, like I hear none of the new games are that good. That's the general consensus. I want to play 2 and 3, but the remaster is bad and there's no new. It's just like, it's like the people that are already in the know and love Silent Hill, right, are like, they get it, but any new comer has like this impenetrable wall to go through.
It's really fascinating. Like, the whole Konami vibe is wild to me, where it's just like they had their most profitable year ever last year, and they don't make anything we love anymore. And it's like they had a decade of my favorite stuff of my entire life, like Silent Hills 1 and 2 and 3. And Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Suikoden 1 and 2, like the like stone thing coming out of the ground.
Metal Gear and Silent Hill are literally, to this day, some of my favorite things in the world.
They had like a solid, I don't know, 2 decades of like literally the greatest things ever made. And then they were just like, nah, pachinko makes more money.
No, it doesn't, though. That's the thing.
Or Yu-Gi-Oh makes more money. Right,
it's
Yu-Gi-Oh.
The Yu-Gi-Oh, and there's like the Japanese baseball games, and that's where they're getting their money.
And it's just like,
that's actually the funny thing is, like, when I looked at that report, it was like, oh yeah, like, when people were saying that like the pachinko thing is too drummed up, it totally is, because it's like a fraction of what they make off of their gaming division.
It's easier to call on like rag on pachinko after you've seen the Big Boss cinematic in a pachinko machine. In the flower field and stuff, and it just feels like they're just like stomping on my heart.
Well, the thing is that's like, yes, that is soul crushing and depression, everything that you're saying, but I think what irritates me more than anything else is Silent Hill could be absolutely as big as Resident Evil is now. I have no doubt in my mind, because of the current environment that we live in. I think if PT could have come out, and just think about the attention PT itself got with YouTube Let's Plays and Twitch and all of this stuff and how into it people were. I absolutely think if you make a good new Silent Hill game, everybody's going to stream it. That will spread to everybody. It will be huge. It will sell super, super well.
But that's the thing, though. That's the thing that metric about, or whatever, that statistic about Resident Evil 7 made me start thinking about. And then I looked up the Resident Evil numbers, and even they're not crazy. Like, we exist in enthusiast press, right? And like, our world where like Silent Hill is everything, and like the greatest thing, and like everyone wants Silent Hill 2, right?
Right.
Is like 5 million people.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a lot.
There are dozens of us.
There are dozens. Exactly. It's the same thing. For a little anecdote from my own life, the other day, I was at the salon getting a haircut, and there was a woman at the salon talking about her boyfriend, and legitimately in my head, I was like, I forgot about straight people. And like I forgot that was a thing that people do. And like, obviously there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just like, I legitimately had that thought. I was like, right, there are girls who like guys.
Yeah.
Why would you do that to yourself?
So
and I was just like, but it's like that. It's like the same thing as anything. If you're in the microcosm, the microcosm seems like the entire cosmos.
Just the mind-blowing thing that, like, Metroid Dread being the best-selling Metroid game ever, and it's like hasn't cracked 3 million yet.
Right.
Meanwhile, like Ring Fit is just like going off.
It's like that's the kind of stuff that blows my mind, right? And it's like that's why you see Call of Duty as like the top seller of every year.
Every year.
Because it's like,
but it's funny because people in our bubble are like constantly negative about Call of Duty,
like rag on it. And it's like one of my best friends my whole life, right? We met when we were like 4. We were roommates for a while. We were in like 3 bands together, like love him to death, right? He literally said to me, he's like, yeah, the only games I pick up the Call of Duty and the MLB The Show every year, and that's it. And I'm just like, wow.
I'm amazed that you could be friends with that person.
Oh, yeah. Big stoner, too. He's like the greatest guy who ever lived. Nice. But like, it's just like, that's the reality for most people. And it's so interesting because I'm so feverishly, passionately waiting for a Silent Hill, and the bottom line just isn't there.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think the point about perspective that you bring up is very good and very true. But, removing the upper crust of the Call of Duties and the Grand Theft Autos and that kind of stuff, Resident Evil is so profitable and makes so much money, and yes, it is not the crazy Fortnite extreme, but it's doing well enough that they're going to make Resident Evil until we die.
And it's because of scale. Like, you just scale it correctly.
Yes, you just scale it correctly. I'm just saying, there is no reason why Silent Hill could not be a successful
100%
series.
Like, if you budget it correctly, right? Like, you look at the scope of the audience, you just set that scope for the budget, don't overshoot what you have available to you budget-wise. And
you can be Falcom.
Right. Like, why? That's what I'm screaming, right? Like, why is Konami, like, in a different reality, Konami is Nihon Falcom, and we just get these beautiful, perfect games for the 100,000 people on the planet Earth that have ever heard of it and love it to pieces, and it's just beautiful.
Back to that, like, it's to them, it's or at least to the management, it doesn't seem to be about making these experiences. It's profit driven, right? So that's why we have football and baseball and Yu-Gi-Oh! Moving away, because like, we can make this cheaply, and we can make a lot of money off of it because people will pay a lot of money for a free-to-play Yu-Gi-Oh! Game.
Right. And that's why I'm like, the billionaires of the world should be solving world hunger and funding Silent Hill 2. And funding Silent Hill games.
I mean, you
fix the world.
You bring up the, like, how profit driven, and I understand that, right? And how they can do these things and make money off of it and yada yada. But like, they've clearly expressed interest in maintaining the Silent Hill brand and keeping it alive, at least in some capacity. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that crazy Dead by Daylight crossover that was like shockingly in depth and had a lot to it.
But then you're like, the cynic is like, okay, but is that because the Dead by Daylight people did all the legwork and went to them and said, hey, please, we'll pay a licensing fee, let us do this? Or did Konami say, I want to know the deals?
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, too, is like trying to get in your head on some of this stuff, because at the same time, it's like, okay, that's the majority of what they do. But then 2 years ago, they put out that TurboGrafx 16 Mini.
Right.
And it's just,
yeah.
And it's bizarre because it's like, this is a super niche thing. It's not as niche in Japan and Europe, but then it's like,
and with Don Casanova.
But it's like they didn't produce a lot of them, but it was extremely well made because they found a partner that like cared about like emulating this thing down to like the crazy nitty gritty, and they made that thing, and it's like, and not a lot of people can get them because they didn't produce a lot of them, but they still went through like the effort of R&D and everything of having that happen. So it's
the
wild.
Confusing thing, because it's like I think about that thing or that SNK collection that like it just had passionate people going into it and trying to do it that got it done. Konami has like I've seen developers just straight up tweet Konami like, please let us make a Silent Hill. Like they have people knocking down the door that would put the time and energy and love into it, and they just say no?
My thing is, though, is just like...
Well, they're clearly saying yes.
They're saying yes, allegedly.
Yeah.
They're saying yes now to like everyone.
I cannot think of a single thing in gaming that reaches quite this level of lunacy where... don't try to remake old Silent Hill. Just don't do it. Just please don't. Please don't. Okay? The entire gaming world was united with PT, where it's like, okay, clearly you understand what's good about Silent Hill. You're going in a new direction that's interesting. Everybody was happy. You know how hard it is to make 12 gamers simultaneously happy? It's impossible.
Yeah, literally impossible.
Everyone was on board. Everyone.
And the legendary reveal of that, the like goodwill garnered by that.
Everything was perfect.
Yeah. And you've got Kojima and Guillermo goddamn del Toro and Norman Reedus, and it's like...
And Junji Ito.
Yeah, it's just like everything's in place.
Everything. It was perfect. It was...
I need the documentary about what happened between Kojima and Konami.
Right.
I just don't understand how you could be anyone making decisions and not be like, let's just do that. Let's just do that.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think... if you look at the pieces... The profit obviously is the main motivator, but then like there's a little something else in there where it's just like, is it spite?
Oh, it feels so spiteful.
Like, did Kojima do something to you that you just want to destroy everything he ever touched?
Yeah.
And is that what happened? Because I don't imagine Kojima is blameless in that, but like Konami, from the stories you hear about them like turning off lights on employees and stuff, I don't know the veracity of all of that, but like. It just sounds wild across the board, and I just need no clip or somebody to find out. Like Jason Schreier, like get the tapes, the secret documents.
No, it's not coming out.
No, we'll never know.
But the thing is like now the food is spoiled, right? Where it's like now if you try to do PT, it feels like old and hackneyed and like derivative.
And like other people have been doing it over and over.
Exactly.
With Visage and Abandoned or whatever, and it's just like, come on, guys.
Now the magic is gone, right? And so now you have like the task of being like, all right, how do we reach that level of excitement and originality and enthusiasm again?
Yeah.
Right. I do think the text message thing is a good idea.
I think, like a period piece, like I can, it's so, I can see it, right?
Yes.
Like it's the game is set in 1998.
Okay.
You're in high school.
Okay.
You're a girl who's getting bullied and text message bullying and stuff like that. Or maybe you texted someone.
That's definitely not
bullying
1998.
something.
But
What? When was 98? SMS texting was 98?
It existed. None of us had phones at school.
Who was texting in 98?
All right, well, whatever. 2003.
I get what you mean.
We had pagers, man.
2003. Whatever. Like, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Or if it is the 90s, I guess it's later than that because of texting. Whatever. I don't know what time is, but like, you're like a girl in high school, you're getting bullied, or maybe you do something. It's just so perfect a setting. I don't know.
Is it though? Because well, like the seed of what you're talking about, I do think is related to the themes of Silent Hill. Like Silent Hill is good because of its subtlety. Like, it doesn't just get out there and be like, I am tortured.
Right.
You learn very slowly how that person is tortured, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't. They don't just get out there and
I mean,
and
like,
spell it out right away.
a story told with very little dialogue. This girl was being bullied. The one day she stood up for herself, she pushed the girl bullying her, and she hit her head and drowned in a fountain. And then, like, the game takes place like 2 years after that all happened, and you're just guilt-ridden and destroying yourself mentally, you know? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It's gonna be an interesting year for Silent Hill fans.
Yeah.
Will it? Like, I'm
if
so...
it's not, then it is.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm so beaten down.
Yeah.
Like, the disease of hope, right?
Yeah.
Like, every time I've thought there was going to be a Silent Hill, there just wasn't.
Yeah.
And, like, all these rumors, they're like, yeah, there's 8 Silent Hill games in development. I'm like, bullshit.
Well, it's funny because we were talking about, how there are certain games where it's like, okay, this is derivative of this thing, but even if I don't like this thing, there are other things to kind of fill that void in my heart. There's nothing to fill the void of Silent Hill. Like, it seems like there is. It seems like there are a lot of alternatives.
It's like Souls-likes.
Really.
It's like Souls-likes, where it's like, even Konami's later Silent Hills felt like knockoff Silent Hill. And it's like lightning struck 2 times certainly, and then 2 more times kinda almost. Like, lightning struck maybe 4 to 5 times total in Silent Hill's
Depending on who you
history.
ask.
Right. Like, I really love 3, I enjoy 4, and I love Shattered Memories. So for me, that's 5 solid entries. But, like, yeah, the other ones aren't great. They're not great.
Are we ready for some emails?
Oh, yeah.
I'm ready for some email.
Blood, you kind of touched on this. Is Metroid really a commercial failure featuring numbers? Hello, Ben and Allies. How do we perceive commercial success? Let's compare 2 games. Both of these numbers come from official Nintendo fiscal reporting and represent the best-selling games in their series. Game A sold 2.87 million in its first 8 months. Game B sold 2.9 million in just 6 months. If you kept up with the news, you may know that Game B, the faster seller, is Metroid. But what you may not have expected that the game it outperformed over a similar period, Game A, is Fire Emblem Three Houses. This got me thinking about the narrative that Metroid is a commercial failure, since I often hear that Fire Emblem is a huge series for Nintendo. I even saw disappointment that Dread only sold around 3 million. I love both of these games, don't get me wrong, but the perception seems skewed, especially considering that Metroid has 9 games over 1 million sales compared to Fire Emblem's 3. Even Kirby only has 2 games that have sold more than any of Metroid's 3 biggest releases. My question is, how do we perceive commercial success? By numbers? By buzz? Does the quality of Metroid make us feel like it should sell as much as Zelda? Does Fire Emblem's previously niche status make its rise seem meteoric?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, when we're talking about, like, even going back to, like, the old Castlevania and NES era, and, like, when you look at what those things that seem iconic in our minds and like what were the touch points for the industry, a lot of them, like Metroid, just didn't sell well, and so yeah, I think there's that weird balance and like we were talking about with the scale and the budget. It's like it's the proportions, right? Of like how well did you budget for this game versus how well it's going to do, and Square Enix just sold off those studios, Eidos, Montreal, and Crystal Dynamics, and constantly, had really well selling games with Tomb Raider and Deus Ex, but they were never to their expectations, right? They were never good enough for them, even though they seemed to be everywhere. They said everybody was playing them, everyone was talking about them, everyone was giving them awards, but wasn't good enough for Square Enix, even though I'm sure they were probably selling better than either one of those franchises.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing is figuring out where that scale, where that management, where like how much of this production value you're going to put into it, right? Like in Metroid Dread, it's amazing that Samus speaks for a minute in another language. Like it's real quick and then it's gone. Whereas yeah, a lot of these other games, you have hours and hours of motion capture and dialogue, and you're spending all this money. And they're spending a ton, probably way too much on marketing money.
Yeah.
And then, the sales don't make up for all the money they blew on the marketing.
It's interesting the different companies, or how different companies parse market share versus mind share. Like, I think that some companies value the former, obviously, and a lot value the latter, where it's like, you got to kind of track both. If it's making a decent amount of money versus its budget and a bunch of people are talking about it, that's a success, on those metrics. I think about the show Our Flag Means Death, which has been in the zeitgeist. Like, people are talking about it. It got decent viewership numbers, has not yet been renewed, whereas other shows that got similar numbers and people aren't talking about them were renewed like immediately. And it's just like, why is that? What's happening here? And is it just different companies that expect different things? Like the Square Enix thing is the perfect example, Bloodworth, because it's like they're clearly just looking at the market share, like the profits, the numbers. They're not thinking about, okay, people loved this. Like, people really, really are talking about this. And it's really funny throughout history of video games and movies, certainly, where something like Super Metroid comes in and like is half of the name of a genre of games, right? Metroidvanias, and it's like it might not have sold as well as some stuff, but it like invented a thing or like helped cement the idea of that thing. And it's like throughout this cinematic history, there are a string of firsts that you've never heard of, like the first movie to do X, the first movie in color, the first movie with sound, and then like later ones just took that idea and ran with it and got way bigger. And like that happens all the time. And it's just so funny that like more value isn't placed on just a well executed idea. But again, yeah, it doesn't make money. So
yeah, I think the framing is everything, right? Because it's interesting that you're saying like these two latest iterations on Switch, right, over this period of time. This one was actually more. And it's like Fire Emblem, for most of its life, was there were 6 entire games that were only in Japan, right? So it was this long-running series in Japan. We actually first learned about it, the first like North American representation of Fire Emblem was Super Smash Brothers, right? And then it came out over here, and it's a relatively hardcore strategy game with permadeath, right? And then the thing about Fire Emblem is post-Awakening, Fire Emblem has been doing pretty well and has had pretty broad acceptance, right? So, like, kind of nothing and then smooth sailing, speaking in very general terms, of course. Metroid's relevance has been like this.
Yeah.
Like, it's just been such a bumpy, I'm here, I'm gone, I'm here, I'm bad, I'm here, I'm good. It's just kind of been so all over the place that I think just the perception of it is obviously going to be impacted by that. Like, you even talking about Super Metroid and how impactful that was. Metroid had, like, no representation on the N64 at all, other than Smash Brothers, right?
Right.
So it's like, yes, you can compare these two recent games on the Switch, but I think just expectation and presence over decades is going to influence how we see these things now.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see which companies, like Nintendo clearly, like, keeps those arrows in their quiver forever, whereas Square Enix sells off that division, or Konami, maybe he'll skin a thing with it, or make a skateboard out of it, or put it in Dead by Daylight, but like won't make another game. It's just really fascinating to see what people do. Because again, it's like, okay, it's sold 3 million, and that's however many dollars per person. If the budget was half that, it's a smash. Like, it's a huge success, right? Or like if the budget was any number less than that, the lower the better. So it's like companies just need to, I don't know, adopt that philosophy. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's amazing how like old thinking, how pervasive that still is today, or like the metrics of success are so out of line with like current technologies or.
Well, and I think about isn't it Square Enix who said that they're working on that like, or maybe it wasn't Square, but they're working on that like Jet Set Crazy Taxi.
Yeah, Sega.
Oh.
Sega,
Yeah.
and they expect it to be like this mega game that'll overtake Fortnite, and it's just like, yo, guys, like, that ain't it. I mean, it could be, but like
they could make a Jet Set Radio that received nothing but 10s,
right?
Give it a huge budget. It will never be bigger than Fortnite.
Unless it has some kind of crazy hook that like accidentally Among Us's. Where it's, because like, but like some games just come out and are huge for whatever reason because like 14-year-olds fall in love with them.
I feel like Among Us has a shoestring budget comparatively.
Yes, and also like a shoestring success compared to Fortnite. It's like
Among Us didn't start the race being like we're gonna be this big.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like you can't wish to be king. You have to just accidentally find power in a lake.
Our next email comes in from Alexander Zirnov.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
I don't know why I'm saying hi for him, but hi.
I was saying hi to him.
I was like responding as if I was Alexander. Okay. I don't know why.
I'll accept it.
Hello, Ben and panel. Usually video game crossovers get our attention because we are attached to one of the properties. But can you imagine any video game crossover that will be unmissable for you, even though you have no interest in any IP on its own? For example, I haven't played Dead by Daylight for years, and I have no interest in Mario, but I will not pass up an opportunity to put Nintendo's mascot on a hook. So good.
Peach? Hooking Peach? Luigi. Luigi's the one I want to
Luigi.
Good
Unmissable crossover. Great question.
But we have to not be interested in either, but the combination is
it would be unmissable just based on...
Yeah. Oh, man. This is a hard question, but a good question.
If like... If Sonic the Hedgehog, I mean, I have interest in Sonic the Hedgehog on its own, so I guess that doesn't count. But if Sonic was like in Madden, I would buy that Madden.
I was thinking, like sports games. Yeah. If they put like Doom Guy in football,
well, we had that for a little bit. EA did that little crossover with Nintendo for a bit. I have NBA Street Volume 3 where they have Mario and Luigi in it.
Dude, we should stream that.
The controls were weird. I tried it at E3 and I was like, why does this feel weird? But that was E3, so who knows?
But what Pac-Man and GTA. I don't know what.
Just like eating people on the street.
That's the movie Pixels, as far as I understand.
Sure. Haven't seen it, but
me neither. Something like that though, where it's like something. I guess the combination we've discovered here is something wholesome trapped in something terrible.
Something sports, because we just don't. We're not,
right.
We're not sports people.
Something cute and lovable, like Kirby in Saints Row, or like GTA or something. Kirby and Last of Us.
Grand Theft Auto and Animal Crossing.
Oh!
I mean, I'm interested in both of those properties, but
in both,
like, just something like the aesthetic and structure of Animal Crossing was something like hard is really appealing to me. I don't know why.
I feel like people have done something along those lines, but I can't.
Well, everyone puts Shrek or Homer or whatever into Dark Souls and stuff like Elden Ring. So.
Our last email is a long one, but very, very good. I like this email quite a bit. This comes in from Abel. Hello, Ben and panel. I recently played Blasphemous as it was free on PlayStation Now, and I, like many, was impressed by its art and use of iconography. Much of it pulled from Spanish Catholic and Inquisition imagery, and though the game is voiced in English by default, the game itself is the work of a Spanish studio. I switched the voice acting to Spanish, and it really changed the way I saw the game. Suddenly, I was really noticing the inspiration of Andalusian landscapes and Spanish art, like Goya, in its DNA. The cultural influence and specificity of Blasphemous went without mention in the reviews I checked out on Metacritic. This got me wondering a bit with the Anglocentrism of gaming. For a long time, Japanese developers were pandering to Western audiences, or in some cases disguising their games as Western products on export. Now it seems like a lot of that has slowed down, with many larger releases from Japan retaining Japanese iconography and voice acting. Other countries, whether Spain or France or Poland, still feel the need to present their games with English voice acting and largely Anglo/Western presenting cultures and environments. This isn't something that happens very often in other art. While dubs exist in film, they're definitely not the standard here in the West, or for anyone who takes the medium seriously. Part of the charm and allure of work from other parts of the world is how it reflects a different culture or artistic tradition. Art should tell us something about how others see the world, not pander to or conform our understanding and worldview. So if a game is made in another country, would you like it to be in that country's language? Do you think developers from other countries having to present their games in English as default, or even change aspects of their games to appeal to an international audience, is something they feel like they should have to do? I understand there's a financial incentive in doing this, but it strikes me as a little sad, like we're losing where the game's coming from and who made it for the sake of $1.
It's tough because with games, oftentimes it's hard to read a subtitle while you're doing some crazy action thing. And so you'll just miss stuff.
Yeah.
I remember Ace Combat. It was like, nope, gotta go to English.
Yeah.
I'm going to miss out on so much because you're
really
trying
good
to
point.
track an enemy
Right.
while people are like screaming over the radio. And
And so like for just that reason, I think it's good to, for me, I prefer playing it in a language I speak, but like their point is totally valid. Yeah. Like I think that it's awesome I wish there was a better way to, I don't know, do it. Cause it's totally, totally. And with film, like I prefer subtitles obviously. And so it's,
I think it's a fascinating question and something really worth thinking about. Unfortunately, as is briefly mentioned at the end, the financial incentive is the end-all be-all. And, like, yes, there is a wide appreciation of foreign film, but even that compared to the big budget stuff, we talk about all the time how big budget movies absolutely specifically edit themselves to cater to specific markets, right? Like that totally happens in films. And unfortunately, I think for many developers, even if they want to include or want to have a more authentic experience, for lack of a better word, right? Like they have to make the hard decision of, will it be easier for us to market and sell this game if we put it in English or make these concessions? If the answer is yes, right? Like these are people in certain cases where it's like this project is ride or die for them.
Yeah.
Where unfortunately I think they don't, just the realities of the world is they don't have the privilege of being able to not make those concessions sometimes.
Oh, for sure. And like if you have voice acting in your game, every new language you translate to is a huge cost.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, most people can't afford that. So like you have to pick the one that'll cater to the most people, which, you know, probably English or Chinese, like just numbers wise.
Well, and I think too, you know, like a lot of it, you know, it goes to the scope of like what you're aiming for, and but I think that when you have animation or games, it's like you're a lot more malleable there. I think in a way that you know, if you do it well, if you have a good team of localization people, that you can make that feel like it fits the vibe in whatever language you present it in, you know, like and I remember when Witcher 3 came out, they had a trailer where they like had one of the bards playing the song, and they just like kept swapping languages, her singing that same song, and like every language you heard it in, it just felt like it fit, you know, and it's like it wasn't like this out of place thing. And so yeah, there are ways to do things well if you like, and to still like represent that culture in a way that comes across in somebody's language. But yeah, it really, like we were saying, it like the being able to absorb that stuff in a way that makes sense in the game, it like really makes all the difference.
Yeah.
So like, you know, and I think there are games out there that will present things in other languages. It's just you've got to pick those moments. Yeah.
Well, and like obviously the more options the better, I think, like when it comes to everything. So like every language option ideally would be there for everything. But there's a big difference, kind of like what you were saying, between localization and translation. Localization is like an art. It's hard. It takes time and research and knowledge of the culture to make things make sense. Like
widely underappreciated.
Like anytime I see a game that isn't from America or the West or whatever, like a Japanese game that's translated to English and there's like a joke in it that still works and makes sense to me, that I know can't have been what the original joke was. I love it because I'm just like, wow, this localization was specific. Like you did that. You localized the humor, like that's hard. And that goes beyond just language. It's culture.
The other thing that I want to mention, because I think it's super relevant here, is you had the right on point of perception, right? And when you're in the bubble, something can seem much more true and easier to appreciate than it actually is. Like you talk, like we couldn't go out on the street and have a conversation with people about Silent Hill in the same way that we probably could about Fortnite or Grand Theft Auto.
How many people passing by, if we just said, like, who's James Sunderland?
Yeah.
Like, how many people before we got
almost
somebody?
No one. Yeah. Right. Like, again, we're going off assumptions and generalizations, but I think that's largely true, right? And I'm not endorsing this, but I think it's a sad fact that for so many people, there's so much media that's competing for their attention that they just won't watch something that's not in their language. They just won't do it.
Yeah.
I like, yes, if you're really in love with games or in love with film or whatever, you may be willing to do that or even super appreciate that. But for a lot of people, entertainment is not anything more than entertainment for them, right? Like it means less to them than somebody who's deeply passionate about it. So they might just be watching something or playing something to unwind for a little bit. And I think that is a not insignificant number of people. And they're probably going to be like, oh, it's not in English, I'll move on to something else. I don't think it's malicious. I just don't think that investment is there in the same way.
It's like encountering a person who says, I don't like music. And you're just like, what?
Right.
How's that possible? But it's like, okay, that's your experience. I can't argue with it. I can't tell you that you like. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And like, you don't enjoy a song if you like walk through a store that's playing it. Yeah. Like what?
Or just like consuming anything, right? Like, I think to enjoy TV or movies or video games or anything, like on some level you have to appreciate music because they're all core components of those things.
And it's like, I don't know, maybe you just don't think about it in that way, but like whatever. But it's just like that's valid.
Yeah.
But it's very strange to me.
That is going to do it for Frame Trap. Thank you so much for the spirited episode, Isla and Bloodworth. If you would like to send in an email to Frame Trap, the address is askeasyallies@gmail.com. One more time, that is askeasyallies@gmail.com. Until next time.